Ready? Okay, we're going to call the Santa Barbara City Council meeting to order on November 10th, 2009. Will you please stand to say the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Falcone? Here. Francisco?
Here.
Horton? House? Horton? House? Schneider?
Here.
Williams?
Here.
Mayor Bloom? Here. Item number 1, employee recognition, service award pins.
Yes, Madam Mayor and members of the council, as you know, every month we recognize employees who will be receiving service pins, and this month we're recognizing 11 employees, and I'd like to read their names into the record, and then I'll ask one of them to come up to receive his 25-year pin. First, with 5 years, Christy Lanning, who's a human resources analyst in the Department of Administrative Services. With 10 years, Sam Blackwell, who's a building inspector in community development. Also, Brian Gronenbeck, who's a senior building inspector in community development, and Daryl Shawn, who's a laboratory analyst too in public works. With 15 years, John Gordon, senior streets maintenance worker in public works. With 20 years, Karen Flores, who's the business office supervisor in the police department. Dave Whittam, who's a police lieutenant. Dave Hedges, police officer. And Nancy Stecky, who's administrative specialist in public works. And with 25 years, we have Charlie Brown, who's the survey party chief in Public Works. And also here to receive a 25-year pin is John Crota, who's an airport patrol officer, too, at the airport.
Hi. Okay, sure. Somebody wants a picture. Come on up, though. Crota, here's your pin. You're welcome. Let me read this. John Crota was born in Detroit, Michigan. He graduated from Michigan State University in 1982 with a Bachelor of Science degree in Psychology and Criminal Justice. He began his career with the City of Santa Barbara in February 1984 at the waterfront and transferred to the airport in August 1984 as an hourly airport patrol officer. He was promoted to regular status in November 1984. John was promoted to Airport Officer 2 in 2004 and has often served as a lead airport patrol officer. John has been instrumental in the area of employee development. He has mentored new officers in an effort to help them succeed in the field of law enforcement. Many of the officers who benefited from his tutelage have gone on to successful careers with the Santa Barbara Police Department, the Ventura Police Department, and the Ventura Sheriff's Department. John's passion for employee development made him an easy choice to serve as airport patrol training coordinator. John was instrumental in the development of the airport's field training officer program. John's vision of a uniform training program, ensuring all new officers receive the most up-to-date training in a consistent manner, became a reality just 2 years ago. Despite its short existence, the Field Training Officer Program has already yielded positive results. New officers now benefit from a comprehensive and challenging training program which ensures that they have knowledge and skills they need to be successful officers. John, it's just really a great pleasure to honor and thank you for your service, for 25 years of service with the City of Santa Barbara. Congratulations on your very outstanding achievement. Thank you. There you go.
Thank you. City Council. After graduating from college in 1984, I moved to Santa Barbara at the request of my sister who lived here. At the time, I thought I would spend a year or two here and then move to one of the larger cities. I took an hourly job at the City of Santa Barbara working on Stearns Wharf and then a full-time job at the airport. The appeal of living in a big city to a young man was great. But as it turned out, Santa Barbara had its own appeal, and it was a much better fit for me, and I'm glad I stayed. In my 25 years of employment with the City of Santa Barbara, I've met a lot of nice people, and I've had many interesting experiences. My 25 years working with the city has been both memorable and enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Item number 2, proclamation declaring November 2009 as End Domestic Violence Month.
Hi. The National End Domestic Violence Month was established in October 1987 to create a community dialogue about violence, to advocate for legislation and law enforcement to protect victims, and to encourage public awareness and action against abuse. Domestic violence affects more than 1 out of 4 women, and this seriously impacts their lives. Domestic violence is a serious and violent social problem that exists in all economic segments of society, in all cultures, and in all countries of the world. During Domestic Violence Awareness Month, we recommit ourselves to ending violence within our homes, our communities, and our country. The Seroptimist Workplace Campaign to End Domestic Violence are ongoing Seroptimist efforts to promote awareness, advocacy, and action. Seroptimists are in a position worldwide to educate everyone, especially women, that they have the right to feel safe and to live free from violence. Seroptimists in the Camino Real region launched a region-wide campaign called Color Me Purple, or Domestic Violence, to provide information about services available for prevention of domestic violence. So I, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor, do proclaim November 2009 as End Domestic Violence Month. We have special recognition to the Seroptimists of Camino Real region for their various contributions to many communities for advancement of human rights and dissemination of information. And thank you, Jane Breckwald, for being here today. There you go. Thank you. Do that. She wants a picture. I didn't know where. Does anybody know this woman? Who are you? No, I'm just kidding. There you go.
Thank you. I've been asked to read this by Myrna Gaskin, who is the president of the Seroptimists. Honorable Mayor, council members, staff, good afternoon. My name is Jane Breckwald, and I'm the member of the Seroptimists International of Santa Barbara. And let's see if there's any other members. Okay, you want to come up? Yeah. We are honored to be here and very thankful to receive this proclamation on behalf of our region governor, region board, and Seroptimists all over the world. Domestic violence is a serious and violent social problem that exists at the workplace and at home, all economic segment of society in all cultures and in all countries all over the world. Seroptimists are actively bringing out awareness of these serious issues to many communities as we can. Okay. Do you have the cards? Okay. Yeah, we're going to be giving you safe cards that are in English and Spanish, and these cards are meant to be placed in the workplaces and at schools and in doctors' offices. They have national and local contact numbers for victims of domestic violence. Seroptimists International of Santa Barbara will be distributing these cards during the month of November. Thank you for declaring the month of November as End Domestic Violence Month. We hope this city will continue to be part of the project, and not just during the month of November, but throughout the year for many years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jane.
Thanks.
And you want to give, Brenda can pass them out. Thank you very much. Thanks for doing what you do. Okay, we have, I believe, several people who want to speak. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No, there aren't, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Then we will first have David Daniel Diaz, followed by Susan Klein Rothschild.
Good afternoon, Santa Barbara. First of all, a little reminder, there are employees and or volunteers with the county animal control who live in the city, and some people are concerned because a woman who is affiliated with the county animal control did take a cat home for 4 days before bringing it to the shelter, and the family was wondering why it was never at the county pound. And so my suggestion is Michael is one of the big shots out there. Give him a call and see if any of his staff takes your animals if your animals are missing, because if you go out there 2 or 3 days in a row, you might not see them there, but after 4 days they might show up. And so to protect our community, please call Michael. He's one of the big shots out there, and see if any of his employees are harboring the cats, because it's a form of extortion, because then they charge you for vaccinations and everything, and it becomes a very sick game. So that's just an awareness thing. And secondly, still no word on relief for chalkboard menus or advertisement menus in front of restaurants. Had some interesting conversations with people, and there's a few stand-up people, and some of the business owners are suggesting perhaps we should start a Scrooge of the Week nomination for various members, whether it's a negative or a positive Scrooge, and hopefully the city will realize that the people who are paying their pension really, they want to make more money, and they need more flexibility. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Susan Klein Rothschild, followed by Ken Locke.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Susan Klein Rothschild. I'm with the Public Health Department. And I'm here just to give you a brief update on H1N1 or swine flu in our county. Swine flu is prevalent in Santa Barbara County as it is in California. As of November 4th, in our county, we've had 43 people hospitalized and 3 deaths. We know that vaccination is the best way to prevent illness. However, there's a delay in the manufacture and delivery of vaccine. So our county has made the decision to give the vaccine to those who are at highest risk of severe illness first. I'm happy to tell you that we are getting more vaccine and we are having more vaccination clinics. We have a clinic scheduled this Saturday, November 14th in Carpinteria from 10 to 2. And just today, we're starting another clinic here in Santa Barbara at Earl Warren. It will be on Monday, November 16th from 3 to 7 p.m. This clinic is for pregnant women, and we have just received preservative-free vaccines. So if there are any pregnant women who've been waiting, please come. We want you to get your vaccinations. It's for parents of infants 0 to 6 months and children from 6 months up through school age, 12-year-olds. And if on the day of the vaccination clinic we have additional vaccine and ability, we will increase that age up to 18 years. It's also for healthcare workers. We urge people to get the vaccine. It's the best way of preventing the illness. If you're like someone like myself and you're healthy, well, if I get the flu, it's not too bad. I stay home, I drink plenty of fluids and stay in bed. But I also risk the possibility of spreading it to someone for whom it might be a serious illness. And for some people, it's quite severe. So we want to stop the spread for all of us. For those who've not yet had vaccination or not yet eligible, we encourage people to do things to keep themselves healthy. Wash your hands with soap and water frequently. Stay home when you're sick. Avoid people who are sick. Covers your coughs and sneezes. Those simple things really do make a difference. If someone becomes sick with flu-like symptoms and they're under the age of 2, if they're a pregnant woman or there's somebody who has medical conditions, we urge them to contact their doctor right away. They may begin treatment. Our goal is to minimize the severity of this illness and keep our community healthy. For anyone who wants more information, we have a website, sbcfluinfo.org, as in Santa Barbara County. Information's put on that regularly, and we also have a phone line where people can call in English or in Spanish, 1-888-722-6358. We hope people take the steps to stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you. The information that has come out has been very good, so thank you so much. Mr. Williams has a question.
I was just going to ask you to repeat the time, days, locations, and categories of folks that can get the vaccination for your 2 dates coming up.
You bet. And this is brand new. I will be putting out a press release later this afternoon.
Thank you.
We have one on Saturday, November 14th, in Carpinteria at the Veterans Hall. That's from 10 in the morning till 2. The brand new one is here in Santa Barbara at Earl Warren Showgrounds on Monday, November 16th from 3 to 7 p.m. And for both of those clinics, we're targeting pregnant women, parents of infants 0 to 6 months, children from 6 months through 12 years, and if we have an X vaccine, we will extend that to 18 years, and healthcare workers. And we're targeting young people because those are the people who are getting hit hardest by this flu, unlike seasonal flu that often hits seniors. It's the young ones that are getting hit the hardest. So thank you for asking.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Ken Locke will be next, and then Ruth Wilson.
My name is Kenneth Locke. She was just speaking about health of this community. I'm sorry to say that it actually, from my perspective now, or a 21st century perspective, this community is relatively not healthy. actually suffers from an illness. In relation to mind-body medicine, right now, and to actually heal this community, it's going to have to, each individual is going to have to show up somewhere like Earl Warren and be transformed from kind of this paradigm into the next. It's kind of like a baptism. They're going to have to be baptized, die of this age, and then be reborn, establish themselves. I just did a video called Tennis and Mind-Body Medicine. It's on YouTube. I actually used an example out of Deepak Chopra, who claims to have some authority in the area of mind-body medicine. I'm sorry to say that he does not. And then I just used an example of Roger Federer in relation to him being suffering from the illness in relation to mind-body medicine. I mentioned last week about the concept of say the age of Aquarius. Say we're not going to need money. Well, we're not going to have actually competition. It actually causes an illness in relation to the relationship between the mind and body, and so you can actually understand the relationship that you have as being elected officials through a competitive means. Well, in the next paradigm, it's not going to be based on kind of a popularity contest. It's going to be we're going to know who actually is a natural-born leader, the best person for that position. It'll be like a no-brainer. You won't have to subject yourself to a competitive arena. Thank you.
Thank you. Ruth Wilson, followed by Kate Smith.
Good afternoon. The election is over. It was wonderful. We had a great voter turnout. So the people have really had a chance to speak. But I want to say that I'm just really grateful for those who've been elected, re-elected, those who are willing to run, even though they didn't win. I just think that's a lot to take on. And for those who are retiring, Lord, I just am praying for you all. You know, this is a time of transition. And transitions are usually difficult periods where there's a lot of stress and turmoil and stretching limits and learning new things. And so it is a time really to be mindful that God is there and that He will offer you peace beyond human understanding. And so I just really lift you up at this time of change. And I ask, Lord, that you would shine your light brightly in this city on all of these leaders, Lord. Give them discernment and give them courage and strength to serve and to be guided by you. And help us, Lord, not to worry needlessly, but to trust in you. Amen.
Thank you. Kate Smith will be the last speaker.
Madam Mayor, members of the Santa Barbara City Council, congratulations to our new leaders. I look forward to working with you. I do believe there's a change that's happening. And so I come bearing gifts. To Helene Schneider, our new mayor, I present you with an official whistleblower whistle. I won't blow it because germs. And I have 3 Mile pencils for the rest of the city council. Today is 11/10/9. This week, my mother would have been 92. When named on the Nixon hate list, she threw a huge party. She was a fierce adversary. She supported my activism, much to my father's chagrin, especially during the Vietnam War. But I realized that her way, which was to be outspoken and critical, is not the best way. So I have joined the Truth Force, the I Force, and I will speak my truth to power, which, by the way, is a book by Carrie Kennedy. She spoke at Campbell Hall last week, and I was so honored to be able to speak with her. The reality that there is school corruption is rising to our society's consciousness. Mahatma Gandhi said, if you want true and lasting peace in the world, you will have to begin with the children. I will work tirelessly to usher in a new school paradigm. Indeed, I have already spoken before that this new school paradigm exists in Santa Barbara in the Star King Parent-Child Workshop and Open Alternative School and our wonderful charters. We will have schools that our children need and deserve. Schools will be child-centered, teacher-directed, and parent-involved. Please join me for a moment of silence for the many youths who have not felt any compassion and they have killed themselves. The last one was last week. He was an East Side youth from El Puente who had a Section 504. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Okay, we have a couple of things on the consent calendar that Brenda needs to read, and maybe only one. Just one second. Yeah, item number 4.
Item number 4, TEFRA hearing for Mental Health Association's purchase of facilities at 617 Garden Street. Recommendation that council hold a public hearing and adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the City Council of the City of Santa Barbara approving the issuance of bonds by the California Municipal Finance Authority in an amount not to exceed $2 million for the purpose of financing the acquisition of facilities for the Mental Health Association in Santa Barbara County and certain other matters relating thereto.
Okay, do we have any speaker slips for the consent calendar? I don't think so.
No, we don't, Madam
Okay,
Mayor.
we don't. Anybody want to take anything off the consent calendar?
I'll move consent.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That was easy. Thank you. Finance Committee, Mr. Horton.
Madam Mayor, the Finance Committee met today at 12:30 and had a lengthy discussion about the 2010 balancing and adjustments. That item is coming up, and I think I'll just let the discussion flow to the item on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Item number 15.
Item number 15, fiscal year 2010 balancing and adjustments, including recommendation B that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara amending resolution number 09-043 establishing certain city fees including water and wastewater rates to authorize adjustments to parks and recreation fees and adjust the fee for reserving library materials.
Okay, Mr. Samario, when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Bob Samario, Interim Finance Director, and we're here to present to you the fiscal year 2010 balancing and adjustments. These are essentially we're going to end up with some recommended adjustments for council to approve, and they're based on items that were actually discussed with council back on September 3rd. As you may recall, we had a special work session, a budget work session back then to discuss not only 2010 but also 2009. And we, at that point, defined for you what the problem was this current year. As you know, when we adopted a budget in June for this current year, shortly thereafter, our revenues deteriorated even further, and we identified that we were going to be essentially under budget by the end of this current year, even just a couple months after adopting a budget. And we defined for you the scope of that problem, and we talked about a proposed strategy, mostly in conceptual terms about how we would address that shortfall. And today we are back to review that again with you and then ask you to actually make those or approve those adjustments to the budget to rebalance it for this current year. So I am going to just go through, and I apologize to those members who were part of the Finance Committee because this is the same report that they heard just about an hour ago. But we are going to go over just a quick review of the revenues and where the shortfalls are, our strategy to address those shortfalls, and then there are a couple of amendments we're proposing to fee resolutions, as we'll get into in a moment. So first, looking at revenues, we're going to just talk about the 4 or 5 key general fund revenues. Sales taxes, one of our largest revenues. Our adopted budget this year indicated that we would get about $18.1 million. That was based on an assumption that they would actually be down from the prior year 1.4%. And as we learned quickly after adopting the budget that we were not pessimistic enough, we based that assumption, or that growth decline assumption of 1.4, on revenues we had received through December 15th, and that was really the first 2 quarters of the fiscal year. So that's data that we received in March of 2009, as well as estimates that we received from the State Department of Finance that projected out growth in sales taxes over the next 6 quarters or so. Based on what happened, and by the way, those estimates that we received from the State Department of Finance was received in January of 2009, and since then we've received revised estimates. We're actually about 3 or 4 weeks before we adopted our budget, we received revised estimates from the state, and as you'll see that we are now projecting about a $17 million revenue, which is a decline of over $1 million, and a revised growth of 3.5% downward, or revised decline. And here are the estimates from the State Department of Finance. The original ones we received on January 16th. You could see that they were all, for the most part, down, but the revised estimates in May are even worse. And you could see that for the quarter that ended June 30, 2009, we had initially estimated 4.4 based on the revised information from the state, and they came in 6.2% down, so 16.2% down, so even further than that estimate. We won't know about the September quarter until late December, somewhere around December 18th, so we're still going to wait for that. But you can see that the revised estimate from the state indicates 11.5 decline for the next quarter. It flattens out in December quarter, and then you see a small decline once again, and then a growth back in June 30 quarter for 2010. Our bed tax, we do receive this information monthly, so it's a little more timely. For the month of October, we are now going to start getting those payments in the next few days. We don't know what that is yet, but you can see that our adopted budget for this current year assumed a 3% decline. Based on what transpired over the last few months, we are now projecting a 5.6% decline, or a loss of $675,000 this year. And this is a table that you see on a monthly basis or periodic basis from the city administrator on the newsletter that goes out. You can see that, and we did highlight for this before in September, that from September of 2008 through July of 2009, we had 11 straight months of decline, which is really amazing and unprecedented. You can see in some months, like February and March, it was over 20% in terms of decline. Our most recent estimates or assumptions when we adopted the budget indicated that for April, May, and June that we would see a decline of 5.9%, but instead we saw 2.9% decline, 15.5% decline, and then almost 20% decline in those 3 months. For July, we assumed an 8% decline, but turned out to be 14.6%. So again, things just got worse as we went along. And just to kind of focus on this current year, you could see that for the first time we actually made assumptions on a month-to-month basis. We typically would say, what are they going to grow for the year, 4 or 5%, or where are they going to go down? But in this case, because things are so volatile and things are changing, we decided that we would do it month-to-month. And you can even see that for the month of August, that we are projecting a 23.1% decline, and in reality, we actually did better than that. As I said in Finance Committee, it seems unusual to say we only got a 19% decline, but it is better than 23%, so we're really a little bit ahead. For the month of September, you can see we also did better in that month than what we assumed. We assumed 10% decline. It only went down 7.7%, and as I indicated, the month of October we'll be getting in the next few days. For property taxes, we based our 2010 budget of $23,860,000 primarily on information that we got from the county. They estimated that the property taxes for 2010 would grow 3%. In May, late May, they revised that estimate just before we adopted our budget, and they indicated that it would only go up 0.8%. And so we obviously didn't have time to respond in time for us to make those adjustments into the adopted budget. That shift or that change represents about $434,000 for this year. And as indicated in Finance Committee, for next year, we're a little concerned because it could go down even more, or we could see a decline, I should say, because the assessments each year are based on CPI, and the county looks to the October, so that the 12-month period for CPI to determine how much they assess. And it's possible that we could see a negative CPI this year, which means that we would see a decline potentially. It could be offset or would be offset by any properties that are sold and reassessed at a higher value based on the market value. But again, just the normal assessment that they levy could go down by a small amount. Utility users tax revenues, very difficult to project based on just a few months of new information this year. We revised their estimate down from $7.2 million to 6.9, which it's a 2.5% budgeted growth, but now down to 1%. That's $325,000. We just through September, it's even worse than that. We are down about 1.4%, but it could change. It's very volatile. Natural gas, for example, is really down just because of the commodity price being down and so volatile. So things could change over the year, but we'll keep an eye on this one. And then, as you know, the federal grant program, the COPS grant program, $451,000 that we budgeted in anticipation of getting that to fund 4 police officers, sworn positions, we did not get. And that's, again, represents a loss of revenues this year. So in total, of all those items, we are projecting, as of now, about almost $3 million in revenue shortfalls in the general fund. Things could change, of course, up or down, but as of now, this is our projection. And our approach, first, in terms of the elements of the strategy, we talked about this back in September, that one of the things we wanted to do is avoid any further use of general fund reserves. Our disaster reserves are fully funded at about $16 or $17 million. We have about $1 million in our budgetary reserve. We didn't want to use those anymore. And so part of this approach is to make sure that we don't use any more reserves. We also wanted to avoid employee layoffs. And when we looked at how we were going to deal with this $2.9 million, whereas in the past we've looked to sort of allocate that amount across all departments in proportion to their budgets, we looked at it differently. We said, what are the priorities for the community and across departments? And we basically identified items that were more readily available to us, particularly positions that were vacant, where some departments had a number of positions that were unfilled and vacant. We decided we would take advantage of those and, in a sense, be opportunistic. So as you'll see later, that a lot of the adjustments come from savings from vacant positions that we're not eliminating at this point, but are just taking advantage of those savings. So you could see that in total, the $2.9 million, almost $3 million shortfall is going to be balanced in a sense through about 6 measures. The first, as I alluded to, are the general fund departmental adjustments, almost $1.6 million. $1.3 million approximately is from vacancies or positions that, again, we're going to reduce the budget for those. We're not proposing to eliminate or lay off any positions. Could be some of that next year, but for now we're saying let's just take advantage of those savings. So that's about $1.3 million of the 1.6 total. We are also recommending some rebates from our internal service funds. 2 of them are fleet fund and our vehicle replacement fund or maintenance fund, totaling $123,000 roughly. And then one of the items that was a big discussion topic at Finance Committee is shifting monies that are currently being accounted for in an undergrounding fund for electric wires. It's $359,000. We're proposing to shift that into the general fund. And just real quickly, we currently receive from Edison, Southern California Edison, 2% franchise fee. Half of one of those percentages is accounted for in a separate fund to complement our undergrounding program and Rule 28 monies that we receive. Those monies are unrestricted, and so we are proposing to shift those to the general fund to help balance the general fund budget. The next item is workers' comp rebates. As we've talked a lot about, essentially we've seen that enterprise funds and the general fund departments have overpaid in their premiums to our workers' compensation fund or program based on claims that have been incurred over the last several years, so that they have been accumulated in that fund as essentially reserves. And what we're proposing, as we did for 2009, is to have some of those funds rebated back to the general fund for the portion that's attributable to premiums that general fund departments have paid over the last several years. And so we're proposing $300,000 be shifted. There's still about $600,000 left in that program as excess premiums that have been accumulated that would be available for any future deterioration of revenues this year or potentially for next year. The next item is transfers from the street sweeping fund. We've talked about this before. This is something we recommended for 2009 as well to help close that shortfall. Funds have been accumulated in that fund based on parking citations that have been levied on folks who've park on the streets during days that are swept. The revenues from that program have exceeded costs, particularly over in the early years when the program was getting up and running, and so they have accumulated funds in excess of what they really need. Taking $100,000 still leaves them about $200,000 as an operating reserve. That's about 20% of their operating budget, which is a fair amount of a reserve, we believe. And then lastly, the use of the general fund contingency account. We typically refer to this as the appropriate reserves. We had established about $700,000 as part of the adopted budget as a contingency, and we are proposing now to use part of that, about $512,000, to basically close the gap, the remaining gap, to the $2.9 million that we needed. And just as I mentioned earlier, we didn't do an across-the-board allocation of these adjustments. This shows where those monies come from by department. You can see that the largest share is coming from Parks and Recreation, Police, and Public Works, and we'll go into that in a little more detail. But this is where we've seen the most vacancies in positions that we are taking advantage of. But again, in total, $1.6 million. So before I actually get into the adjustments, I just want to first just take care of a couple items, the resolutions that were proposed to be amended. There are two proposals. One relates to Parks and Recreation fees. They have a fee that covers a myriad of programs and certain activities, and historically that fee resolution has provided authority to the Parks and Recreation Director as well as the State Administrator to make adjustments throughout the year to respond to changes in circumstances and to the changes in demands and the like. And that flexibility has been available to them in the past. This past year, for this current year, for 2010, the adopted resolution did not provide that authority, just as an oversight, and we're recommending to make that change. We're also asking and recommending that that authority extend to two other fees, the greens fees at the golf course as well as tennis fees, to again be able to respond to changing circumstances. But we are not recommending that we make any change so that we can make changes to the fees related to arts and crafts shows. We want to exclude those from the City Administrator and Parks and Recreation Director to make those kinds of changes. And then the second one is in the Library Department. This has to do with fees that are charged for people who hold materials through the Black Gold system. Every library in the system, there are about 6 who participate, do charge a fee for anybody who holds materials. The only exception is the City of Santa Barbara with respect to juvenile materials that are held. We do not charge a fee for those holds. The system itself that's used to make these reservations automatically imposes a fee, and we're recommending that we amend our resolution to start charging a fee, not only because it generates a small amount of revenue, but primarily because it's a workload issue. The library staff have to go in there into the system and manually delete those fees. There's about 26,000 of those each year, so it really presents a workload problem for them. And so it's a fee of 50 cents per item that are being held. And again, it's going to generate a small amount of revenue, but again, it's primarily a workload issue. So getting out into the departmental adjustments that are proposed in the City Administrator's office, again, you've seen all these, so I'm going to go through these relatively quickly. Just stop me if you have any questions. 4 items. The first is a grant that's been received called the CalGrip grant, and it will help fund Mr. Olson, the Specialist Projects Manager. So part of his time will be allocated to this project, $27,737. We're also recommending allocating 50% of the Employee Relations Manager's salaries and benefits to the Solid Waste Fund. As you know, she's already taken over oversight on my behalf of that operation on a part-time basis, so we're proposing allocating half of her salaries, $40,586, to that fund. And they also want to recognize new revenue from the water resources for Inside Santa Barbara, some services and some programming that they're going to do on their behalf. Will generate some revenues. And then they're going to reduce hourly support by $7,000 in the City TV program. In community development, they are going to assign a planner, a part-time planner, to the Creeks project for 6 months out of the year. And the Creeks fund, as you know, is a separate fund outside of the general fund, so that will save the general fund $24,460. They're also recommending suspending board and commission stipends beginning January, which would save $25,000 and some change. And then lastly, they want to hold a vacant position, vacant records of technician or administrative specialist position, and that would save for this year $66,674. And in the finance department, the proposal is to leave the assistant finance director position vacant for the remainder of this year. And as you know, part of that, my time used to be charged to the solid waste fund, so there's some adjustments for that. But the net impact of that is a savings of $105,000, and then the balance is from just some reductions in miscellaneous line items. In the library department, you can see the largest component of their $167,000 in adjustments comes from 3 positions being held vacant: a library assistant 2, a library technician, and a senior library technician. And then, as I mentioned before, the 50-cent fee on juvenile materials holds would generate $7,300 in revenues. In the Parks and Recreation Department, I'm not going to go through all of these. In total, their proposals represent $390,000 in savings, the largest of which is the first item, 4 positions being held vacant: business manager, grounds maintenance worker 1 and 2, and pool maintenance technician. And I'm sure Nancy Rapp is here to speak to any of those impacts that we did discuss at the Finance Committee meeting. In the police department, we talked about this as well. There will see salary savings from the fact that we have 9 positions currently vacant, and this is from July to December, 6 months, where we would generate $500,000 in savings. We will generate those savings. In January, late January, they do plan on putting 9 people into the academy. That's their hope. But in the meantime, between now and then, or July and then, they will generate $500,000 in savings from those positions. And then this is actually an add-back, an adjustment, a technical correction to the budget. We had an animal control supervisor that was reinstated in June. That was one of the positions that was initially proposed for elimination but was added back. But we didn't add back the budget dollars of $101,868. Public Works, $296,000 in adjustments. The first comes from leaving a project engineer 2 vacant. It's $135,000. They're going to use hourly staff to backfill a survey technician that will save $41,000. And then they're also proposing to reduce the special projects for vector control in the Lincoln Underground Fuel Tank Program. They had some money carried over from prior years that were unspent, so that's going to help them carry through this year. But next year, we're going to have to look at this again. And then lastly, in the Public Works Department, these are the ICS adjustments we're proposing. That's part of the rebate, if you will. How they're funding those is from, in the Facilities Maintenance Program, holding a custodial position vacant. That will save $55,000. And then holding a senior custodian position vacant until January 1st, and that will save $31,000. In Fleet Maintenance, they have a service writer that's going to be absent, away from basic leave of absence for 5 months. That will save $35,000. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay.
I also wanted to clarify one item, because an item came up at the Finance Committee about the undergrounding fund, and I got some additional information from the Public Works folks. A concern was expressed today at the Finance Committee that if we transferred that $359,000 on an ongoing basis to the general fund, that when we do a future undergrounding project, a 20A project on a arterial, that those funds wouldn't be available to assist with the service connections. And I've been informed that there was a change in state law since the Milpas project that requires Edison to pay for the service connections for the electrical connections. And we believe, and the Attorney's Office believes, that both for Cox and Verizon, they're also required to pay for those. We're in a dispute with them right now, and we're fronting the money through that fund. But this issue may become moot. We think our position is strong. But the number will be a lot smaller in future projects because Edison's required to pay it. And we'll get the issue resolved pretty quickly with Cox and Verizon. So I just wanted to add that clarification.
Okay, good. Thank you. And then I wanted to just clarify the 9 positions open in police are because there's no police academy this fall. And I see the police chief coming up here. Will there be a police academy in January? That's where I just wanted to get that straightened out. Hi, Chief.
Hi, Mayor. Mayor and City Council, there will be an academy in January, late January. The academy that we usually go to is the one in Ventura Sheriff's Academy. They are not having a class because of the lack of hiring in Ventura County for all their police departments, including the Sheriff's Department. So they have no one. So we're looking at a couple of other options. We are leaning towards the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department Academy, where we have sent folks before when we did not have an academy in Ventura. And we're going to probably make that decision on Tuesday. We continue with backgrounds. I've hired 2 of the 9 so far. I have an interview tomorrow with another person, and the other 6 backgrounds should be completed in the next week or 2. If they pass those backgrounds, they'll get an interview with me. So our attempt at 9 is Hardy. but it really depends on how the rest of the backgrounds venture out, because we have some pretty high standards in Santa Barbara, and we would rather go short than not take what we believe to be top-notch employees for the city.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks for clarifying that. Mr. Horton, did you have something?
Well, Finance Committee recommended the adjustments to council, and we did comment on the utility matter that Mr. Armstrong talked about. Also, Ms. Macias may want to talk to the juvenile library fine situation or charge for books, because council had addressed that earlier in the year and decided we didn't want to go there. And this is a change, but I think maybe Ms. Macias could explain that to council. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Irene Macias, Library Director. We are back requesting to impose the 50-cent fee. At this point in time, every other Black Gold jurisdiction is charging the 50 cents for juvenile materials. Again, it is a workload issue. The staff is required now, the Santa Barbara Public Library system staff is required to go into the system and remove the fee for each juvenile material that is requested. There are some people that can place up to 20 holds on juvenile materials, which is a workload not only for the library staff in our library system, but staff in other libraries too. So there may be situations where staff at the San Luis Obispo County Library is pulling books for Santa Barbara users, which will go for free, even when their own library users are having to pay the fee. So we are looking at the workload issue in terms of us. We're now down 3 staff members at our central library. Also wanting to be good partners with our Black Gold libraries, and that all the rest of them are now charging. And it does cost us about $5 to $6 for each request that we fill. So the 50 cents does not cover the cost of a hold, but merely is our attempt to hold down the numbers of requests. Ordinarily, we would want children to place hundreds of holds in the ideal world. And we do have thousands of individual titles at our own libraries. There are times when the students need a book that's not at our library and want it to be brought from another library.
Okay.
One more comment. I think you said that you had waived fees in some cases if staff felt you might want to mention that.
Yes, thank you for reminding me of that. We do empower the staff at the front line desk to waive fees in various circumstances, and I know that the staff at the children's desks oftentimes ordinarily do that just because they know that there's some sort of hardship. So it certainly is something that the staff is able to do. It's not an absolute.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Falcone and then Mr. House.
These two things came up at Finance Committee, and I'm very glad to hear that, these are 3 things actually, but I asked questions about the undergrounding and about the police. And Chief, I'm going to give you another shot to put this on the record also. So the 20A Edison projects, which are, for instance, what's going on Cliff Drive right now, the state law now requires that Edison do the connection for the individuals and for the commercial properties. John. Mr. Eisrink.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Falcone, for clarification, Edison costs to connect their services from the street to the buildings for both residential and commercial. The Edison costs are covered actually in the Rule 20A funds. So the council had the option of approving a resolution to allow that to occur, and that did occur on the Cliff Drive project. So the Edison utility costs from the street to the building for both residential and commercial are covered by the Rule 20A funds. Now, the Cox and Verizon are different than that. Yeah. Their services for the Cox and Verizon are a little different than that, in that for Milpa Street, for example, the Cox and Verizon lateral services were paid by the Cox and Verizon companies. And then there was
Thanks to Mr. House, in part.
That's correct, and that was worked out. And then we had some tariff information that exchanged during the design of the Cliff Drive project. And since there was some new information that came in late in the project at the bidding time of the project, we are now pursuing with Cox and Verizon. We're seeking reimbursement for the city funded cost for the Cox and Verizon portion, and we're seeking reimbursement for that.
Yes, but then what was the legislation at the state level that Mr. Armstrong just alluded to?
That was with regards to the Edison contributions. On the Milpas project, Edison was, or the property owners were to pay for the Edison contribution for the service, or the Edison service lateral portion of the project for Milpas. The city actually paid for those. The city came up with the funds for the Edison electrical service component. So that is the difference between then and now, where the regulations changed to allow for the Rule 20A funds to cover that Edison service cost only.
Okay. The point of the conversation was that it's fairly irrelevant, and I think Ms. Schneider and I and Mr. Horton all agreed on this, it's fairly irrelevant where the funds come from, whether it's from the franchisee, whether it's from Fund A in the city, Fund B in the city, or some other source of funding. The point is that the individuals who are being visited with this cost they have no control over because it is a municipal decision and a municipal function improvement for the benefit of the community. True, absolutely, they're getting a benefit. But Mrs. Smith, who's owned her house since 1960 and lives off of, some other street, Mission, let's say, which is likely the next project in 6 or 7 years, should not feel the impact of that improvement, and neither should a commercial entity feel the impact. That's the point. So wherever the money comes from, I know we can't bind future councils, but there was a very, very strong sentiment at Finance Committee, and I would venture to guess, probably on this particular council, that the people who own the property being connected to should not feel the burden of the project. So I guess that's sort of the bottom line. Where it comes from, don't care. But we're taking money away from a source that did fund. That's the concern. The other thing is, Chief, with regard to the 9 positions, we had this conversation in Finance Committee, and it has to do with the community's concern over safety, calls for service, and the strength of the officers, not the strength of the officers, but the strength and numbers of the folks on patrol available to respond to their needs. And as we know, and have discussed many times, Academy, although it may start in January, it actually takes 18 months to get someone from start A to, in their own black and white by themselves, being able to be an independent operator, if you will. It's a long time. So I guess what I'm asking is for you to take this opportunity to reassure the community that although 9 is an enormous number, it is being addressed as expeditiously as we can, and that patrol and the community's needs are not put at less importance because we have, for some reason, fallen behind the 8 ball, or more people have retired than we thought, or for whatever reason. We are addressing this as fast as possible, and people should still feel as though we have a strong police force, although I submit an insufficient number still. But that's a conversation for some other council.
It takes about 18 months. It might be a little shy of 18 months to get someone out on their own. But currently, we are at full staffing on patrol. We are at pretty close to full staffing in the Detective Bureau to investigate crimes. So the community just needs to be reassured that when they pick up the phone and they need a police officer, that we are at full strength in patrol. What we've done that is pretty seamless to the community because they don't visually see it is that we've changed some of our organizational structure to accommodate that while we wait for these alleged, hopefully 9 individuals. So we have some issues such as beat coordinators' duties, the police activities league officer, and other areas of the department that we've spread amongst other people. These jobs are still critical and they're still being done, maybe not as quickly as we would like, but other people are doing it. All of that because our mission is to answer a call for service in the black and white police cars, and everything else is secondary to that. So they can rest assured that there are plenty of officers working patrol.
There are plenty of officers working patrol and doubling up doing other functions, which in itself means that the department is thin. So I submit that down the road, hopefully instead of just keeping pace with what is okay and works, that we actually beef it up, and I hope others in the future will continue to fight for you.
Well, the patrol officers are only doing one duty, so they don't have other duties, but the rest of us do, including the managers and supervisors. But rest assured that there are plenty of people working patrol answering that call, and that's really the main mission of what we do. Thank you.
Mr. House.
Chief, while you're still there, if you would, the animal control officer was, there was just an oversight in the way that we accounted for that. I think when we talked before, we were pretty clear that we wanted to retain that position. There's no change here, except for just on an accounting basis, right? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Just one more thing for Ms. Macias, if I could please. Just because it's easy to misunderstand this, and I think it's been represented in different ways, I want to be sure it's really clear. Just confirm for me that what you told us a few minutes ago is that we're not, a child going to get a children's book is not going to have to pay 50 cents to get the book.
No.
I've heard people tell me that they think that's what's going on, so I want to really be sure it's said out loud what it really is going to be.
The request is to be allowed to charge the 50 cents for all holds, including juvenile materials. And actually, if a child places a hold on an adult book right now, they would incur that fee.
Well, the word hold is maybe a technical term, because
yes.
If I were to go to the library and pick a book out, you don't charge me 50 cents.
No.
And you don't charge a child 50 cents. You're talking about putting a request for a book that's not there, and what's been happening is adults typically will go in and request 20 books or something in advance, and then when they come in you let them know or something, and that's what you're talking about, right?
Correct, yes. A library user may request a book that is either not on the shelf in your home library, is on the shelf at another library at one of our Black Gold partners, or is on the shelf, but you're looking for the convenience of not having to pull it off the shelf yourself.
I see.
So when you go into the computer system and make that request for that book to be held for you, the computer automatically adds a 50-cent fee for the service.
I see.
And when a child comes or someone comes to the library to retrieve those books and check them out, we currently, the staff at our Santa Barbara libraries is currently having to go into the system and waive that fee so that they are not charged for juvenile materials.
I understand, and that's the workload that you're talking about. But again, I just really want to be sure that if a young person were to go over there and want to get a book from the stacks and take it home with them, they've got their card and everything, they're not charged 50 cents for that.
Correct. And as I said earlier, my preference would be for library service to be entirely free. We're making the best of what we can with our resources.
Okay, great. I think you've cleared it up. Thank you very much.
Okay. Mr. Williams and then Mr. Horton.
My only comment is I appreciate the chief's detail, because I do think it's very important to this council that we return to and maintain a sworn strength of 140 police officers. And so the due diligence and the hard work you're doing to get us to 9 folks in the academy is going to be needed and appreciated. And of course, taking advantage of any opportunities to get lateral transfers, is also an important part of that strategy.
And Mr. Horton?
I'd like to move recommendations A and B in Council Agenda Report number 15.
Second that.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much. Thanks for all the department heads who were here. Item number 16.
Item number 16, appeal of Planning Commission decision for 415 Allen Road.
Okay, and this is an appeal, so what we normally do in an appeal is we have a staff presentation on the issues, and then we have appellant and applicant, same person here, and then we'll have the public and then the council. So, and of course we have a planning commissioner attending, Ms. Lodge. Hi.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. This is an appeal hearing for the 415 Allen Road project. On June 11, 2009, the Planning Commission denied a request to initiate a zone change, general plan amendment, and local coastal program amendment for the project site. Here's a slide of the site location, 415 Allen Road. It is close to Cliff Drive and Las Positas Road. Here's an aerial view of the project site. You can see in the lower area is the single-family residence, and the upper area is undeveloped currently. The proposal is a request to subdivide the existing lot so that a new residence could be built on the smaller lot, which is proposed parcel B in the upper lot. A simple lot split is not allowed because it is not consistent with the zoning ordinance and the general plan. The existing parcel is non-conforming to lot area because it is 1.37 acres instead of the required 1.5 acres, which means it can't be subdivided under the current zoning of A1. So in order to subdivide the lot, parcel A, which is non-conforming already, would become more non-conforming and would require a lot area modification. Parcel B, in blue, would only conform if it is rezoned to E3. You can see that the zoning in this area is primarily A1, except for the Braemar tract above, which is zoned E3. The whole area has a general plan designation of 1 unit per acre. Proposed parcel B, in pink, would not conform to that. So the request includes a general plan change from 1 unit per acre to 5 units per acre. This would result in the parcel being basically an island of 5 units per acre surrounded by multiple parcels of 1 unit per acre. This would actually be similar to spot zoning. I'd like to give you a little bit of zoning history in the area. I know this is difficult to see, but prior to 1960, the project site was zoned A1. Then in 1960, there was a zone change in this area down here that I'm pointing to, which is where the project site is located. At this point in 1960, it was rezoned from A1 to E1. At the time, it was thought that developing 1 acre lots would not be feasible. In 1963, a request to rezone that area from E1 to R3 was denied. And in 1966, there was a request to rezone that area again from E1 to E3 RH for a hotel, and that was denied. And then in 1975, as part of the city's residential downzoning, it was rezoned from E1 back to A1. Then in 1976, there was a 4-lot subdivision. The project site that we're talking about today was part of parcel D. And then in 1978, parcel D was further subdivided. The lower lot was 1 acre, and the upper lot, which is actually the project site we're talking about today, was 1.37 acres. In order to approve this lot split, the upper lot at 1.37 acres was required to get a lot area modification. One of the conditions of approval on this approval was that there would be no further subdivisions of this parcel. The current proposal is a subdivision of this lot, but in order to approve this, the following is required. Parcel A, the lower lot, would require a lot area modification. Proposed parcel B, the upper lot, would require a zone change, a general plan amendment, and a local coastal program amendment. I'd like to put this in context a little bit. The Braemar Tract that I mentioned previously was annexed to the city in 1956, and the zoning is E3. The city's land use element describes this area as one of improper subdivision and of being too dense. The proposal that you're looking at today expands that pattern of development. This is the area that the general plan describes as improper. And I'd like to just repeat that again. This is staff's position that the general plan describes this as an improper subdivision, and this request today would be expanding that further. Also, changing the general plan designation to 5 units per acre for this one parcel, while the surrounding areas would remain at 1 unit per acre, is not appropriate. Therefore, staff recommends that council deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission decision to deny the initiation of a zone change, general plan amendment, and local coastal program amendment. That concludes staff's presentation.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Ms.
Gilla
Kennedy.
Lodge would like to speak next.
Oh, okay. Ms. Lodge, I'll leave that. Yeah, that microphone's on.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Just very briefly, what the city's general plan land use element says the Braemar Tract presents is a vivid picture of improper subdivision techniques. And this appeal is asking to expand a mistake, essentially. And it's almost, you might have an A1 lot adjoining denser territory anywhere, and for the same reasons, yes, it would be nice for the property owner of the A1 lot to change it to more dense use, but there would be no more reason for that somewhere else than there is here. And actually here, there's even less reason because of the poor planning that went on, not under city auspices, but it was zoned before it was annexed to the city. And so I urge you to uphold the Planning Commission decision and deny the appeal. And I'll be here to answer questions if anyone has any.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have a question?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Francisco has one.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Kennedy, when we were at the site visit the other day, it was apparent that none of the lots across the street that are all zoned A1 come anywhere close to meeting A1 lot area requirements. Are any of the adjacent A1 lots actually A1 sized?
I know that the ones you're referring to across Allen Road are not, but I believe to the west are much larger lots.
And so do those meet the 1.5 acre requirement?
Well, it would be 1 acre, and then depending on the slope, whether it would need to be 1.5 or 2.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, there are no more questions, so we'll go on to the appellant applicant.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, my name is Steve Americana. I'm here representing Andy and Linda Siebold, who own the property in question. Andy Siebold will talk to you first about what it is that he wants to accomplish, and then I have a PowerPoint presentation, as always, and explain some of our reasons for urging you to approve this.
Okay.
So, first, Mr. Siebold.
Okay, Mr. Siebold? Okay.
Madam Mayor, council members, my name's Andy Siebold. I'm owner of the property at 415 Allen Road. Both my wife and I live and work in the city of Santa Barbara. First, I'd like to thank you for coming to the site yesterday, and I hope you get a better understanding why we're making this request, because the land at the end of our lot is really unused. and it has been since the house was built in 1978. We bought the property in 1999. It was absolutely trashed when we moved in. The weeds were 6 and 8 feet tall. There were 3 illegal apartment units in it, and it hadn't been cared for in years. We only saw it because one brave real estate agent took us inside. As we were cleaning it up, as we were turning it into our home, a lot of the neighbors came by and thanked us for what we did to the neighborhood. And after we did that, in 1995, we looked at that portion of the lot and we felt that it would make a good place to build an additional home. We then talked to the homeowners around us, none of whom had any objection at that point in time, and we filed with the Planning Commission, and that was denied, but there were some technicalities which allowed us to come back. So we're now back. But we've kept in touch with our neighbors, and we've discussed our plans with them several times. We wrote them a letter once again before the Planning Commission meeting, and in your packets there are letters from several of them supporting this project. There's also one from Dr. Rogers who objects to this project, and one of the reasons he gives is that it would destroy his view, yet I can't find from his location that he can actually see the part of the property that we're talking about. We're part of the neighborhood. We don't want to see it changed materially, but we believe that adding one single-family, single-story house that blends in with the existing neighborhood will not have a negative impact. We intend to remain in our house for a long time, remain a part of the neighborhood, and continue to have a good relationship with other homeowners. We are asking for you today to enable us to build one single-family residence on a new lot, a home that fits into the existing neighborhood and that is in approximately the same size as the houses surrounding ours, that is between 1,900 and 2,000 square feet, not counting the garage. My hope is to build a house that includes solar panels for electricity and hot water, to make it as green as practical, and to use it as a model for future smart home design, meaning that lighting, heating, audio, and video systems are controlled by a smart home controller to further reduce energy consumption and make it the best possible house it can be. I'm asking you today to enable us to take our oversized and conforming lot, which it is, and split off a second also conforming lot so that we can build this new house. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Americano.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a slide actually that you saw earlier. It shows the property in question is the red property here. We're going to get one closer up. And the yellow is the Braemar tract. This is an aerial photograph of the property. As you can see, it's right here. This is the Siebold house. This is the existing zoning. As you can see, it is E3 up here in the Braemar tract. It's E3 down this side all the way to this point on Allen Road. Here's where the A1 parcels start that Councilmember Francisco was asking about. This is the Siebold property, and these are the A1 properties to the south and to the west. The parcel in question is right here with a little circular dot. That's the property today. This is where the house would be. It's a close-up of it, which you saw a minute ago. And that's what the house would look like. That's a simulation, obviously. And that's the site plan showing you the shape of the existing parcel and the location of the house on the parcel. And this is the area that would be set aside for the new parcel, shown in this fashion. So we have a number of different reasons to suggest to you that our proposal is appropriate. First is the efficient use of scarce vacant land. There's very little vacant land left in the city. And where we have a vacant piece that is suitable for a house, for a single house, we think it is time, it's appropriate in the life of the city to begin looking seriously at those housing opportunities. There are very few of them. The advantage of having this kind of a small site is that it doesn't change the character of the neighborhood. It adds a housing unit, a middle-income housing unit, but it doesn't change the nature of the neighborhood. We need housing. You have heard this over and over again for probably 15 years. We have a lot of conflicts in the community about how to produce that housing. If we have an opportunity to make a contribution towards the solution of the problem, we urge you to embrace it. One house in this fully developed neighborhood will not change the neighborhood character. I think it goes without saying. This is a unique parcel. Actually, we looked around and we could find no other properties in this neighborhood that have these particular qualities. Number 5, we think that this is one of those opportunities to generate revenue for the city. When a new parcel is created, it's separately taxed. There are permit and other fees paid to the city. We've done a calculation, and we estimate that over 10 years, the revenue to the city would be about $260,000 of both fees and taxes. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot of money over 10 years, $25,000 a year. But at this point, when the city is facing the kind of fiscal stresses that you heard about earlier today, we think it's appropriate for the City Council to look at all opportunities for raising money in a way that doesn't change the basic nature of the community. And we think this is one of those opportunities. And we think that this creates a parcel that's compatible with the neighborhood because the other parcels are the same size. And just to demonstrate that point, the proposed parcel A that we're talking about, with a house on it, would have an FAR of 0.06. The 4 other parcels that were in the same subdivision back in the 70s that staff showed you earlier have an FAR of 0.09. The proposed parcel B, assuming a 2,000 square foot house and garage, would have an FAR of 0.19, and the neighborhood, including Braemar, Allen Road, and the 3 Cliff Drive homes, have a FAR, an average FAR of 0.17. So we think that the lot that we're talking about and the size house that we're talking about fits in very nicely with the neighborhood. So the last point on the reasons for approving this request is that it corrects a longstanding general plan and zoning anomaly. And let's focus on that a little bit because that was so much a focus of what the staff report is about. Going back to this graphic, you can see the Braemar tract here and this property just south of it. This is a close-up of the Braemar tract. It presently has a general plan designation of 1 unit per acre. It's designed for it is shown that way on the general plan, even though it is fully developed, except for one parcel. It is fully developed, and it's developed into 12,000 square foot lots. So the general plan designation that's on there now does not reflect the current development pattern. To make this point, you can see this chart. The current lot size in the Braemar tract, 12,717 square feet. The zoning minimum, E3, which is the zoning, is 7,500 square feet, and so the lots are the right appropriate size for the zoning. But look at the general plan. The general plan designation, 1 dwelling unit per acre, that's 40,560 square feet. How did that happen? This is as we have reconstructed it from the city's records, and I think that what the staff said a few minutes ago confirms this. In 1956, the county approved the subdivision of 12,700 square foot lots. In 56, the city annexed the Braemar tract, zoned it E3, and gave it a general plan designation of 3 dwelling units per acre, 15,000 square foot minimum. That's close to the actual development pattern, not right on, but close. And then in somewhere between 1964 and 1975, the general plan was changed to 1 dwelling unit per acre with 1 acre minimum. The general plan was actually moved further away from the existing development pattern and further away from the existing zoning. So we think the appropriate solution is not to perpetuate this anomaly of history, leaving the Braemar tract with a general plan designation that doesn't reflect either the zoning or reality, but rather change it, and change it to reflect zoning and reality. We think that the general plan is strongest, is best, when it reflects reality. As we say here, the current general plan designation is inconsistent with existing zoning, Consistency is the better planning practice. In fact, there's been a California law in place since the 1970s requiring cities to have general plans and zoning that are consistent with each other. Santa Barbara is a charter city, and so it's one of the few places in California where you're not required by law to do it. But you talk to most planners, and they will tell you the better practice is to have general plan and zoning be consistent with each other. Number two, the current general plan designation is inconsistent with prevailing development patterns, as I've indicated. Most of the parcels in the tract are smaller, much smaller than 1 acre, and the general plan requires a minimum. And there's no significant increase in density that will result because there's only one parcel in the Braemar tract that can still be subdivided if you put this new general plan designation in place. So at the most, it would result in one additional home in the Braemar tract, but it would solve this anomaly, this historic anomaly. The staff has suggested that the neighborhood is already too dense, and that's a reason for turning it down. I would suggest to you that the fact that the neighborhood is too dense is not a reason to turn it down. In fact, adding one unit does not materially increase the density. It's another way of saying that somehow the character of the neighborhood may be changed for the worse. We don't think that adding one house materially changes the character of the neighborhood. Number two, the staff has argued that the new parcel will be nonconforming as to lot size. This is actually a very big point. The staff has reported to you that the parcel owned by the Seabolds, which was created in 1978, was created at a time when it was nonconforming as to lot size. Our review of the city's records indicate that's not the case. In fact, the slope density ordinance was adopted in 1975, and this parcel already had a house on it when it was created in 1978. And the same question came up at the Planning Commission. What is the purpose of the slope density ordinance? The purpose of the slope density ordinance, as it was explained by the Assistant City Attorney to the Planning Commission, is to regulate the construction of homes on parcels with slopes, not to regulate the creation of lots. And so when a lot is created with a house already on it, the slope density ordinance does not apply. That's exactly what happened in 1978. And that's why the lot was created. The staff reported that there was a lot area modification granted in 1978. We have combed through the city's records. We've talked to the staff planner. We have found no record of any lot area modification granted in 1978. And so we don't think that the parcel is nonconforming today, nor do we think it would be nonconforming if this smaller parcel were created from it. And we think that based, again, on what the city attorney told the Planning Commission. He said that the zoning ordinance, the slope density ordinance, does not prohibit this particular subdivision. So this is a summary of what I've just said, that the 415 Allen Road is not conforming as to lot size because it was created in 78 in compliance with the slope density ordinance. Therefore, the proposed new parcel A, the one that with the house already on it, would not be nonconforming as to lot size because there's already a house on it. And the new parcel, parcel B, will comply with slope density. It is large enough to comply with both the minimum lot size requirement of the zone and the proposed general plan designation and the slope density ordinance. And we think that's consistent with what Mr. Vinson told the Planning Commission in June. The third point in the staff's report to the Planning Commission, which was forwarded to you, was that staff could support the proposal on the newly created lot if it had an upper middle income restricted single family detached unit. That was an interesting point in the staff report. If the staff is prepared to support the creation of a new lot with a price restricted unit, that tells us that there's no planning or zoning reason not to approve it. It's simply a question of whether or not it meets the city's affordable housing goals. But the city's affordable housing goals are set forth in your inclusionary housing policies, and those policies would call for this particular project, if you approved it, to pay an in lieu fee of about, we've calculated about $18,000 to the city to satisfy that particular policy. But saying that the house would have to be an upper middle income restricted single family detached unit is in essence to say, no, you can't build it. And the reason that you can't build it is because if you do the math, you know that most houses these days cost about $400 a square foot to build. That's at least the numbers we're hearing on the fire rebuild homes. If you build a 1,500 square foot home at $400 a square foot, you do the math, that's $600,000 just in construction costs, not counting permit fees and the rest of it. The price, the city's maximum price for an upper middle income restricted single family detached unit is in the $300,000 range. And so nobody would do it. Nobody could do it. The condition or the comment in essence means no, you can't build it because of this proposal. I want to suggest to you a somewhat different approach, and this is a comment I made to the Planning Commission as well, that we have an opportunity here to allow a private property owner in a middle-class area to build a new middle-class house in a way that does not change the neighborhood's character. Now, historically, this community is fond of asking, why should we let you do this? Or a variation on the theme is, and what can we get in exchange for giving you permission to do it? And I would suggest to you, given the community's housing shortages, and given the community's fiscal problems, that when you're facing a proposal like this, a suggestion like this, that the question really should be different, and that is, why should the city say no? Is there a compelling reason to say no? And we would suggest that there's not. That the fact that the history of the Braemar Tract has led us to a general plan designation which doesn't reflect reality or zoning is not a good enough reason to say no. It is a good enough reason to amend the Braemar Tract general plan designation so that this would, in fact, fit in. And so, in conclusion, our recommendation to you, our request to you is that the Council approve initiation of the general plan amendment and the local coastal plan amendment, that you approve the initiation of the zone change for this parcel, and that you ask staff to prepare an amendment to the general plan to change the designation of the Braemar Tract to cure that historical anomaly. These are all policy level decisions. The actual implementation of them will come back to a future City Council, along with a lot split and all the other approvals that may be needed for that. So this is the necessary first step. Without this first step, of course, we can proceed no further. I thank you for your attention and would be pleased to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Williams.
I was, I suppose, thinking about this very point about the staff willing to recommend it if it was a price-controlled unit, and that's sort of consistent with my philosophy, because I guess I'm still at the why should the city allow this stage, but I also recognize that it doesn't seem to be very realistic given the price considerations. So I guess the question for both the applicant and staff is, would you support something that's sort of along those lines, where you have affordability by design, say with a square footage restriction on the unit to be built of, say, 1,400 square feet or something like that, in order that the unit actually be middle-class housing instead of a $2.5 million home by the end of it. And I guess that would be a question for staff whether they would support it, and a question for the applicant if they would support it.
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Williams, first and foremost, staff's position is that we believe the requested general plan and zoning amendments are inappropriate, and we do not support the proposal. The only reason that we included that statement in the Planning Commission staff report really was in response to the applicant talking about needed housing in the community, and that they have generally described this as an attainable or a housing opportunity that could meet housing needs in the community. So we just said, well, if that was really the intent of the owner, and we would be considering this as like a bonus density. It's an upzoning, which is equivalent or analogous to a bonus density, that an affordability restriction would then reconcile what we think are some general plan policy concerns. The city does approve bonus density for affordable housing, so that was why we said in that instance it could be supportable, but that really is not our recommendation. Our recommendation and our primary finding is that it's would not be appropriate for the general plan and zoning amendment.
I don't quite understand that. So
it's an upzoning.
What is your price range that you would consider that a real contribution, or did you just not mean it and you're just responding to their criticism?
We recommended the highest level price range that the city's affordable housing policies and procedures provide. So we thought we were being realistic within the realm of the city's adopted affordable housing policies, does recognize at the highest level an upper middle class restricted detached home. So that was why we said, again, if the applicant were proposing to meet the city's affordable housing policy and program, then perhaps it could be supported.
Okay. And what's the applicant's view on this?
Our goal is to build a house that fits into the neighborhood. It's like the other homes in the neighborhood. It said it's a seamless addition. We looked at the houses within 300 feet and totaled them up, and the average of the square footage of those houses is 1,900 feet. And so we're looking for something within that range of 1,900 feet. Could we agree on something smaller? We probably could. It's difficult to know what that number is because it depends in part on the cost of building it and other factors. But I think we're open to the idea, and if it's a matter of having that conversation with city staff as part of initiating this, I think we're open to the idea.
Thank you.
Okay. Nobody else's lights are on, so it's to the council. We don't have any public speaker slips. Okay, so it is to the council. Ms. Falcone.
Well, the first question I have is, what is that upper range number? And I know, and I've just reminded that it was 200% of median. Median is now, is it at still 68.4? And so twice that is 140 income for a family of four. But that doesn't tell me what that sells for. It was my recollection when we were talking about the middle income project that never got built on Montecito Street, 535 East Montecito, that the numbers were in the 550, 600 range, which Mr. Falstich and other staff members were having a bit of apoplexy because it was approaching market at that point. Now with the recession, it's probably even closer to market, so the upper range is probably of acceptability is probably lower than that. But even if we look at a $500,000 restriction, I'm not quite sure I agree with Mr. Williams's figure of a $2.5 million home at the end of the day. I would say maybe $1.5 million at the end of the day. But your point is still the same. It's give or take $1 million here or there. No, I'm kidding.
But I do think you're correct, Councilmember Falcone, that the figures that Falstich gave us and the developer brought us for that project was actually even in the 650 range.
I think it got there, and everybody was queasy on that. But I think the 550 range was something that the community was willing to, or at least the experts, the staff, and so forth, were willing to say, well, that's plausible. It's got enough of a break from actual market that it works. Anyway, I just, for clarification, and everybody working with what are sort of real numbers and not exaggerated high and not exaggerated low, let's just, try to stick with reality. I guess my feeling, I guess I'll start off with comments at this point. We have to respect the zoning. I mean, we have to do that, otherwise we all, fall to chaos all over the place. But I don't think that's what the applicant, Mr. Americano, are suggesting, is that we throw it all over the side of the ship. I'm nervous, generally speaking, about doing things on a case-by-case basis. However, that being said, when basic fairness applies, it bears consideration. And I do appreciate staff's work and sentiment for general plan concerns regarding adherence and consistency and so forth. There are a couple of things that get me about this particular parcel, and I was not on the site visit with the group, but I came just as it was leaving, and I did get a discussion and a chance to walk around the property. This lot is in the interior of this well-developed, albeit wrong, development. I agree with Commissioner Lodge. This development should never have been built, but I was, in diapers at the time, so, However, this lot is not on the fringe. It's not on the border. It doesn't bleed into those other areas like Yankee Farm, Campanile Hill, where, for full disclosure, my parents live, or Veronica Meadows, which may or may not be built in our collective lifetimes. But they are all 1 acre. They're all 1 acre or thereabouts. They're darn close. If this parcel, quite frankly, were on the edges and bleeding out into any of those other established 1A communities, I would say no. Or I don't know what they are, actually, but they're 1 acre or thereabouts. I would have no problem just out of hand saying, no, I don't think this is appropriate. The fact that this is on the inside of this development, and the simulation, albeit I take them with some grain of salt, is impressive. The house as proposed, whatever square footage it is you used for the simulation, looks. In fact, I looked away at one point, and you had changed the slide and put the house in. I couldn't tell. Maybe you designed the simulation to look that way. I don't know. You're very clever, but. I don't think it will be an impact on the neighborhood. I don't think it will be anything that moves anyone. Nobody's here. It should be stated for the record that there is no testimony, negative testimony from the neighborhood. There's no one speaking at public comment. That says a lot to me, and I know it does to others. It was also moving, and I recognize that your first and foremost concern is with the general plan consistencies and with the zoning. However, it is a bit moving that you say it could be built if the price was right. So, and I know, Betty, I'm sort of, yeah, I get what you're saying. Betty's like, no. But, so something can be built, and it's a matter of, what are you really hanging the hat on. If this really can be a model project, a solar, a green, fits in with the neighborhood, 1 story with, you told me yesterday that you were willing to put a 1-story restriction so it could never become 2-story in the future. I know there are houses around that have that quite persuasively. Mine is one of them. So I'm leaning toward allowing this, partly because the lot is so big, out of character with what has become that neighborhood, is on the interior, and it seems relatively harmless to me. I don't think it's opening any floodgates, although I remain open to being persuaded in a different direction, so I'll listen to my colleagues.
Well, I'm going to weigh in. I don't usually, but the reluctance of lights makes me. This is a transition area between 2 zones, and so when you say bleeding into, what we're saying is that you would add part of this parcel to another zone. One of the reasons that was given that it would be a good idea is that we need to have more housing. The question is, do we need to change zoning to allow for more housing? And I don't think we do. We have a lot of places in the city. I think during the campaign, and I know during campaigns we hear a lot of things, but I heard that really weren't true. But I did hear more than 1,000 units could be built under our existing zoning, and I don't know the exact number, but I know we have a lot of units. So to say that we have to change zoning here to add another unit, I think is not true. Well, it might be true in this little case, but it's not true to add units for the whole city. The other thing that I heard was we need the revenue. I was always told, and I believe, and maybe it's changed over the years, that residential projects do not pay for themselves. Instead, they cost the city money in fire department, police, all the different services. It is the commercial developments that we get money from. I know there will be property taxes paid and so on, but that's far outweighed by all the services that we give to people in their own individual properties. So I'm not persuaded by any of those. I am persuaded by, and there's a compelling reason from my point of view, is I'm persuaded by the fact that former planning commissions, former decisions have said no further subdivision. And if I remember being on planning commission when we decided no further subdivision of something, it took a long time, it took a lot of thought, and we thought that that's what it would be. So for us to say, oh, let's not listen to the former group and let's just subdivide this is to me not good. It's not good planning and it's not good thought process. If we say this is only, we could put on it only one story, then if we said you can't subdivide, but we're subdividing, and if we say you can't build more than one story, what would stop us from building more than one story then? I mean, I know, I think when you put these things on, they need to mean something. So I'm weighing all of that. On the other hand, when you look at that map, it's so logical. Just cut that off and put a house on it, you know. It is just very logical. And so we're stuck with some odd zoning things here. And I know this is one of those funny tracks where we struggled with it in what we wanted to do at the end of Allen Road, and it's because of the poor planning here. So I'm just putting forth the one hand and then the other hand. For me, the first, I haven't heard the compelling reasons to overcome what a former planning commissioner said. A planning commission said, and that is no further subdivision, or maybe it was a former city council, to say no further subdivision. And I'm just not there yet. So I too am ready to listen to what people have to say. Well, I have one light. Mr. House.
We had a letter here that had expressed some concern that the zoning, if it were to be approved, would allow 5 houses to be built on that parcel. And they said they have no objection to their building one additional house. This is the property owner across the street at 414. I have no objection to their building one additional house on the property, but they object to a zoning change that would allow them to build up to 5 houses on the per acre. Would address that for us, would you please, just to be answering the concern?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Councilmember House. I did actually respond to one letter that was submitted to me in that regard. It is confusing for people who don't understand how it works, but it would be 5 units per acre, but this lot would be 0.29 acres. Mm-hmm. And a single-family lot, so only one house would be allowed. Yes. Okay. I acknowledge that it is confusing.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's just answers the concern. When this was annexed, what was the? I think it went by me on the slides. What was the actual zoning when it was annexed? Prior to being annexed, and then after it was annexed.
You're talking about the project site?
The project site area there, adjacent to the already the developed area there. There was a prior designation of
E3.
E3?
Yes.
Braemar Tract, E3.
And it came in, then the practice the city has is that when we annex at the equivalent density, correct?
Yes, and it was E3.
And so we annexed it in at E3.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So...
Right, I'd like to clarify that not the project site.
Okay, please. What
the
site
Braemar
then?
Tract, which is the smaller lots, were annexed in 1956 and given an E3 zoning designation.
I see. But the project site itself is just outside of that.
That's right. And at one point, that was A1 and then rezoned to E1 and then back to A1.
Got it. Okay, now I see the slide here that goes that way. This is a tough one. I want to go back for a second to this condition that was alluded to about the subdivision. When this was, at some point in the past, there was a condition associated with this property about future subdivisions. Do you have the history of that, or can you give that back to us, or?
Well, I do have a copy of the resolution, number 44, by the City Planning Commission, and it was for, in regard to the modification or to the lot split, and there were 3 conditions, and number 3 is that there be no further subdivision of these 2 parcels. There were concerns at that time that this larger lot had been divided and then again divided.
I see. And then the house that we see on the property was constructed at that time. Is that?
That I believe was existing during that.
Oh, it was existing when that subdivision
was subdivided. Yes.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Boy, this is a tough one. I just logically, if you look at the pattern of development, one of the things that we try to do is to make sure that the overall pattern of development is retained. And what's anomalous seems to be the lot there that has very little purpose and sits there behind a fence on the street, but nobody has access to use it or play in it or do anything to it. And it seems like it's become quite an orphan there, and it's too bad. I mean, the rest of the neighborhood has developed in a certain pattern, and this particular little piece would fulfill that. And that's kind of when you look down from the sky at it, it's just so obvious that there could very well be a home there. And one of the things that surprises me in a way, and maybe doesn't, given that it seems so practical, is you don't have like a big outroar like we've had before from the other end of Allen Road, where they were very concerned about additional development at the end of the street, this being maybe closer to the mouth of the street at Cliff. So we don't really have an uprising on our hands, and this property isn't being really utilized for anything whatsoever, and it could have a life. So I'm like the mayor here, where I'm going back and forth between that somebody said no further subdivision, and now we look at it and it would make all the sense in the world to have a house there, and nobody cares. So,
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Vincent.
I've been trying to resist commenting on this subdivision condition, but since my prior comments have been alluded to, and for the edification of the council, particularly, I don't think this is necessary for the members who have been planning commissioners, but the Subdivision Map Act prohibits ordinance or conditions that prohibit conditions such as no further subdivisions. Now, the point I want to make for the council is that's in the context of, you can't say, notwithstanding the fact that this land has enough land that you could subdivide it again under the existing zoning, under the existing general plan, we just don't want you to do that anymore. That's where that provision of the Subdivision Map Act comes into play. What I would submit for the council is the more pertinent question for you is whether or not to initiate the general plan amendment and initiate the zoning amendment. If you can make those affirmative decisions, I would submit that the prior planning commission condition saying no further subdivisions, taking a legislative action to initiate a general plan amendment and to rezone this property is more significant than whether or not you're following a prior condition on no further subdivisions. And so I would focus your attention on those 2 actions. If you decide that a general plan amendment makes the most sense and is the most consistent given the totality of the circumstances for this particular situation, then I would not get hung up on the no further subdivisions condition from a prior subdivision.
Thank you. And let me back up in my commentary to the sense that I have in this, and I think this is more than intuition. This is a sense of just plain fulfilling on a neighborhood's complete development, that that making the amendment to the general plan and looking at this to fulfill that would make a lot of sense, and I would support that. And that goes along with the bigger question that Mr. Vincent is talking about, rather than getting specifically hung up on that one particular point from the past. So that's where I fall on it. Thank you.
Okay, Mr.
Madam Mayor? I
yes.
just wanted to provide one more comment. I'm sorry I was a little late for the introductory staff comments. With regard to the general plan and land use designations for hillside single-family neighborhoods, I just wanted to comment that the city, when we have annexed vacant property or property of larger hillside acreage, the city's policy has been to have the property zoned A1, which again was the history on these larger parcels of land. So that was consistent with the practice at that time. As we are updating the general plan land use map now as part of Plan Santa Barbara, we are not looking to amend hillside single-family neighborhoods or any single-family neighborhood land use designation. That has not been the focus of the Plan Santa Barbara process. So the city's general plan neighborhood designations for hillside areas include minimums of 1 acre, 1 dwelling unit per acre, 2 dwelling units per acre, or a maximum of 3 dwelling units per acre. Those are the hillside neighborhood designations. The anomaly, quite frankly, is that the Braemar tract came in at a non-hillside density, and the corresponding zoning of E3 in other parts of the community are the more suburban and flat neighborhoods where you see the E3. It's the San Roque neighborhood and portions of the Mesa. And so I just wanted to let you know that for general plan consistency, a hillside neighborhood like the Braemar area would be typically either 1, 2, or 3 dwelling units per acre. And often when the council or planning commission is considering an initiation of a rezone and a general plan amendment, I just wanted to mention that sometimes the specific designation is not decided at the initiation, and that staff is sometimes directed to explore the appropriate designation. I just wanted to put that thought in your mind that historically when this area had a 3 dwelling unit per acre designation, that might have been a better fit. If you really are going to ask us to look at what's appropriate, is it just for one lot? Is it for the whole Braemar tract? That would be something that I, as staff, am looking for, whatever the outcome today.
Madam Mayor, then just may I say, this is a 19.9% average slope for this one in terms of hillside, right? Okay. One of the things I just want to say is if there were any thought that, in my mind, that this would be harmful to this neighborhood in any way, shape, or form, I wouldn't even go where I just went. If it were to be E3, would then that lot line have to be adjusted so that would it have to be a larger parcel to be able to accommodate that one house, or could this work? It has to be 5 units per acre for this one house to be there, right?
Yes, in order to make the applicant's proposal work, they have requested the E3 and 5 dwelling units per acre.
Mm-hmm. And the other parcel that we were talking about that's in Braemar that has development potential that would open up under this, do you know much about that at all? Is that
the one remnant? I'm not sure which one Mr. Americano is referring to.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We haven't been looking at
Okay, I'm just
that.
looking for unintended consequences, that's all. All right. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Williams and then Ms. Schneider.
Grant, I didn't get the conclusion there.
For me?
Yeah.
I support the proposal from the applicant for their on their appeal.
Okay.
In going with what Mr. Vincent said, I think that's the appropriate way to look at this.
Okay.
And I'm going to common sense, I think, on this one.
I think I agree, though I do agree with the concerns about unintended consequences. I do think that if the intention is to create a middle-income unit, it should be substantiated in some way. And I think that the added bonus about having a limited square footage to the building is that there's less likely to be larger traffic impacts. Because Allied put forward that question and objection, I actually responded to that and said, well, if it's a smaller unit, you're less likely to have renters or other things that would create more traffic impacts. Does that address your concerns? And the answer I basically got is, yeah, that does address our concerns. So I could support it if we, if as part of the initiation, staff worked on how to substantiate that on an actual limit on square footage. I don't know if I want to necessarily say right here, right now, it's going to be 1,400, but I think that staff could do that. And of course, this is a two-step process. This has to come back to us for a rezone. So I think we would have the ability to ask for that and ask for the appropriate designation that staff has to recommend to us to allow one modest-sized unit to be built at that location.
Okay, Ms. Schneider?
Thank you. This is messy. Could you put the slide up that had each lot with the zoning that's currently designated at each lot, the A1s and the E3s? You didn't you have one that had? That works.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that are listed A1 across the street from Allen Road, as Mr. Francisco was asking about earlier, they don't really fit the designation of A1. Am I correct in saying that? Does that fit more of an E3 zone? In terms of
Yes, I do want to comment that the A1 boundary goes all the way across to the right to the Las Positas Road. And we actually have had discussions with the property owner of believe it or not, there's private property along that road that's also zoned A1 to the east of there. So the line goes across.
Other side of the creek?
Yes.
The other side of the creek, though, right? Okay.
Yes. So that's correct. Those parcels do not meet the minimum 1 acre designation that are shown along Allen Road on the east. I just wanted you to know there's more residential land further east.
I appreciate that. So in terms of the general plan update process and the land use zoning map and so forth, is there a proposal to correct what's there on A1 into what, I mean, it's not A1 and it's already built. I mean, is there any kind of movement to correct that to what looks to be more of an E3 zoning or not, or could you comment on that?
Yeah, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Schneider, we are reviewing throughout the city the consistency of what's on the ground, what the zoning designation is, and what the general plan designation is, and looking for better consistency than we have in certain problem areas. However, for the residential hillside neighborhoods, no changes are recommended. So we did not see this as something that needed to be changed for future land use direction and future development. The general plan really, I believe, should reflect the future vision of what the community build out would be, not be constrained by the existing land use patterns, although be cognizant of it, but that is not necessarily the dictating direction. That is why the general plan land use element in describing this neighborhood said, we do not want to see it continue in the way that it had in the past and sets a vision towards lower density with the maximum one dwelling unit per acre. So long answer, but no changes are recommended. The one thing that we are going to show on the map, I think more clearly, is, again, all the hillside residential areas, as I mentioned before, are either 1, 2, or a maximum of 3 dwelling units per acre for our general plan. We're just mapping it slightly different, but making no changes.
Okay, but that's a good philosophy, I think, the way you describe that. I'm just thinking of, so in reality, moving forward with those 4 lots there, I mean, really, what you're saying is that if, let's say, those 4 homes disappeared or something like that, and in terms of trying to build something else, you would look to an A1 zoning compatibility in terms of new building, but there's already current buildings there that fit more with an E3 zone. So it's just more of a paper A1 zoning, even though, because unless something drastic happens to that part of the area, nothing's going to change there dramatically in terms of the development on that side of Allen Road. Is that right?
Yes, I do think that those lots there exceed the minimum E3 standards, and they would be somewhat constrained in meeting all of the A1 standards. They are non-conforming to A1 in terms of front, side setbacks as well as lot area. But I do think that's why the majority of the Braemar tract has the E3 zoning classification. That allows those property owners to make reasonable improvement to their property with a zone classification that closely mirrors their development. But that's a zoning matter which is separate from a general plan designation, which is longer term.
I literally go back and forth while I'm sitting up here. I guess, I mean, the lack of concern of in the area of neighbors, the actual location of the lot split, that's it's not on the other side of the property. The non-conforming A1 uses on the other side of Allen Road, sort of leans me to the idea of that it might be okay to do this without actually dramatically changing the character of the lot. On the flip side, it's asking a lot to do a zone change and a general plan amendment and so forth. Given that this would have to come back to the council whenever that comes back to make a final determination, maybe some of those issues can be addressed a little more thoroughly. And certainly if this were to go through looking at a maximum size of the new home on that parcel would have to be, to me, something that I would have to require if that were to be approved, because having a large home in that smaller lot wouldn't fit at all. So I don't know if that helps anyone on the council or not, but that's what we're all saying. But it seems to me that would be something that those kind of questions can be answered bringing it back. If we initiate it today, it would still have to come back. Of course, that prolongs the process instead of just nipping it in the bud, but this is a tough one for strange reasons. But.
Okay. And there are findings, too, if we want to if we want to initiate a zoning change, eventually the findings will have to be held up and 5 people will have to vote for it. So that although 4 will be okay for today, but it makes it even harder. Mr. Horton.
I understand the issues and the variety of concerns, but I support the Planning Commission and the staff opinion on this matter.
Okay. Did you want to make a vote? Sounds like you were going to make a... we have one person that hasn't spoken yet. Mr. Francisco, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a tough one for me as well. I think, and when this was before the Planning Commission, this was a divided Planning Commission. This was a 3-2 vote. And I guess the difficulty is, ordinarily I would say, we don't want to initiate this for one parcel. On the other hand, part of the reason this is before us is because this really is, I think, in many ways a unique case, and that's why we're being asked to make a policy decision that is outside what the rule book says. One of the things that I look at is, if you look at this lot, they've got 220 feet of street frontage. And so if this were divided according to the current plan, both lots have equal street frontage, more than adequate street frontage. And I don't believe, at least from looking at the map of the surrounding area, that there's anything else that comes close to meeting those requirements. So I do believe that if we went ahead with this, it would not set a precedent for anywhere else in the neighborhood.
Could we have you put the new map up there so we can see what you're talking about?
I also don't believe, and I certainly understand staff's idea that in the hillside area, you want to keep density low. At the same time, the reality of the Braemar tract is it's not low density, and it's never going to be. There's no way that the property owners are ever going to relinquish their right to own homes there and to rebuild them if they were destroyed. We've seen that in all the fire situations. People, doesn't matter how small the lot is, they have a vested right to have a home there. So though I would certainly agree that in any vacant hillside areas, I mean, were the city to annex more county land, for instance, in this area, we certainly would want a lower density in any annexation. I think in this case, reality is what's there on the ground. So given that this really is, at least as far as I can tell, an absolutely unique situation, we are not setting a precedent because there's nothing else around here like this, and given that this seems to be a logical use of otherwise unused land, I think I could support it.
Okay, note for the council, everybody's spoken now, and we have a 4 o'clock time certain, which is past, so I apologize to those people who are here for that. If we could speed it up a little bit, please.
I'm happy to make a motion, Madam Mayor.
Okay, Ms. Falcone.
All right, thank you. And thanks, Scott, for that clarification and bringing us back to the legal position with regard to discretion. And when this comes back to staff for the vote of the zoning change, then evidence of other parcels that could be affected by this, square footage recommendations, green elements, stories, and possibly price points, all those issues can be addressed at that time, as I think was alluded to. So I'm going to make a motion to initiate the zone change, the general plan amendment, and the local coastal program amendments for 415 Allen Road.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that, Madam Mayor. And I'll also sort of chime in. I really do. I mean, it may be that we deal with this when it comes back, but I agree with Mr. Williams about the limiting of the size. I think it's sort of an important thing for us to make sure, for sure, that this stays really compatible with that neighborhood and that it provides as close to a community benefit in regards to general affordability as we possibly can. So that's just a sentiment I want to voice at this point in making and seconding this motion.
Madam Mayor,
yes.
May I ask for clarification or just confirmation? The general plan and zoning designation change in order to support the applicant's proposal would be E3 and 5 dwelling units per acre. So the council is asking us, and this was another point that the applicant made, is that looking at all the E3 zoned parcels and possibly amending the general plan for that Braemar tract so that it would no longer be 1 dwelling unit per acre either, because otherwise I
don't think
I want you all to understand that otherwise this would be
Braemar
one lot with a 5 dwelling unit per acre general plan, only one. So that's why the applicant's presentation did include discussion of the entirety of the Braemar tract. So I just wanted you all, I wanted to hear that you understood that what would make sense then in following this direction is to look at a general plan amendment for the other E3 zoned properties in the area.
Can I make a suggestion?
Can I
Well,
respond?
no, it's Ms. Falcone's.
Sure.
Maker of the motion. The intent is not to open up the entire can of worms, that this apply only to the one project. However, that being said, if this triggers your needing to look at, not act on, but look at the tract and what that would mean, then that would be for when it comes back, the discussion would be had on that particular point when it comes back with the evidence that you need to present based on what this motion and this action triggers. The intent of the motion is to, and the action, I think, is to have this apply only to this particular lot, not the entire. But I understand if legally you are triggered to having to look at the entire tract. I'm not interested in that unless you have to. Scott.
Well, I have. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Vincent.
No, Madam Chair, I don't believe that this action of initiating this zone change or this general plan amendment requires the consideration of the entire tract. But as Ms. Weiss is mentioning, it may make sense to consider it or just to understand what that would entail.
And that would be all good information, and all the information is good. What you do with it, depends on what you do with it. You don't have to act on it. If you're not legally required to, then that's the bottom line. However, does it make sense to look at it? Possibly. But my motion is for this parcel and this parcel alone.
Okay, and do we have a second on that?
I seconded it, and I think that's we're going to get back from staff a report on exactly what Betty was just talking about, and then we'll be making a decision when it comes back. And I think that way we cover any unintended consequences of which we may be concerned. And
I'm not going to be able to. Go ahead.
I don't really believe that that's correct. We'll follow the council direction. So the motion is made by Councilmember Falcone is directing that we only consider the one lot. So we don't generally go farther if your direction isn't to look at other areas to be have a new general plan designation. So if
okay,
the
Betty, I
motion
think I
is-
was confused because when I'd asked for clarification on that. By the way, I still support the motion. I'm really thinking that we're being asked about this particular situation. It was my understanding from a comment that you'd made to me before that by necessity, our initiating this, it had to take into consideration the rest of the Braemar tract. And you're telling us right now that it actually doesn't have to.
I think from a policy perspective, it would make logical sense to look at other E3 zoned, look at the E3 designation for the Braemar tract along with this individual parcel. That's what makes sense to me as a planner, and that's why I interrupted your deliberation, because the motion does not give that direction.
Right.
So it would be helpful to know the council's direction. We can certainly continue to pursue that and plan Santa Barbara as another venue to raise that discussion of this Braemar tract neighborhood. It could still be discussed, but I wanted to be clear on your direction. Is it the individual site only, or do you want us to look at the other E3 zoned
Well, I'll
properties?
just be very explicit. I don't believe that there's a need for us to stir up whatever hornet's nest there is associated with the rest of the Braemar tract. I think we're focusing specifically on this property, and I agree with the maker of the motion, and that's that.
Plan Santa Barbara should address this.
Well, I'm not going to be able to support this, and because I believe in supporting what the Planning Commission has said in the past and even now, and to me this is a spot zoning. If we're only going to be doing this for this one little parcel, it's not right. I think there could be other ways to divide this up, but it just doesn't seem right, and especially if it's 5 dwelling units per acre when we are recommending 1 to 3 dwelling units per acre in hillside neighborhoods. So I will not be supporting it, but I can see that there's probably enough support for it. I just hope that the future council will understand the planning efforts enough to make good decisions on this one. Okay. All those in favor of the motion, please.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
As I understood it, the reason why I was trying to make a suggestion was that, as I understood it, Ms. Weiss indicated that to initiate a zoning change, we do not at this time need to have a conclusion of what that zoning change is. We only need to initiate that. And that could give staff the opportunity to present to us what the proper designation for this parcel would be in order to meet the interests of the city and the applicant. So I was actually going to suggest to change the motion to uphold the appeal and to initiate the zone change, but to allow staff to present to us what zoning designation the parcel should have in order to meet those interests, and what substantiation that this would actually be a middle income unit in terms of size or whatever else in a deliberation with the applicant.
Well, as the maker of the motion, I'd be happy to include that. Thank you for the suggestion.
I'll second that.
Okay. So we have a motion and second. Any questions or anything else? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No.
No.
Thank you. We are now to item 17, please. Brenda?
Item number 17, interviews for city advisory groups.
Okay, we have interviews for city advisory groups. I'll be calling the advisory group up. I'll try to go A to Z. I think when we vote on this, I probably should go to Z to A because we haven't done that in a little while, so just to let you know. So I'll call the group, and then if you've applied for that group, you can come up and tell us why you've applied, and so on. Sorry we're a little bit late here. Access Advisory Committee, is Mr. McClellan here? I didn't see him. Okay, Airport Commission, see Mr. Gilbert was here, yeah. And it would be helpful if you could come up to the front if you have applied and wait for the next person. Okay, Mr. Gilbert, hi.
Okay. Mayor, council members, I'm William Gilbert, former airport commissioner, and after an absence, I'm applying for the position again in the airport commission. I live in Goleta in the north-south flight path. I'm not a pilot or part of any group requiring airport service, nor am I a member of any organization seeking to direct or restrict the use of the airport or adjacent property. I do not have a problem with it or its ownership. My only concern that anything in my community must be of benefit to all. My personal tenet is if you want a good community, you must work at it, where you can do the most good, whether it's picking up trash in front of your house or somebody's dropped, or embracing the opposing part of an issue, whatever does the best job. I have a background in aviation. Years ago, I was sent here as a representative of McDonnell Aircraft to the Naval Department at Point Mugu. I was later recruited by Raytheon to manage flight tests of their products. I've operated from military, private, and public fields where I've had to procure facilities and manage operations. I have traveled extensively. I've been in airports whose edifices are considered the latest of the 17th century. Innovations to a man sitting under an umbrella with a handheld radio and a cooler of beer for sale when you land. He was also the TSA. I have been amused and abused in many airports. I feel my experience and experiences can best be used in the work on the new terminal and its impact on the community. Is there any questions of me?
No, but I like your presentation. Anybody? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Gilbert. Anybody else for the airport? Then we have Architecture Board of Review. Seeing those. Arts Advisory Committee. Central Coast Commission for Senior Citizens. Community Development, Human Services. Oh, I'm sorry, Civil Service. I didn't see it. Civil Service. Come on up. Oh, yeah.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and members of City Council. Thank you, first of all. I'm Catherine McKee, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to discuss my reappointment to the Civil Service Commission. I've served on this commission since 2005, and I'm interested in continuing to serve my city. My qualifications for reapplying are that I have an extensive background in the human resources field in both a union and a non-union environment, and I served as the Chief Human Resources Officer at both First Interstate Bank Limited and Standard Chartered Bank Americas region, and prior to that at both Mattel and 20th Century Fox Film Corporation, I served as a manager in the Human Resources Department. And in those roles, I supervised other managers. I had anywhere from 20 to 40 employees under my supervision, and I dealt with progressive discipline either directly or indirectly in that role. In my career, I was also responsible for developing and implementing affirmative action programs, and I believe in developing and enhancing a diverse workforce, which the city of Santa Barbara does have. There's a question in the interview sheet about what's been the most significant or rewarding experience during my time on the commission. And this commission has evolved into an effective and efficient group, and I know several years ago there were some issues with it. And while we don't always agree, the five of us, we're able to reach consensus through healthy debate on the facts and the circumstances. And with respect to changes, which was a question, we have a protocol, and it works. And when we identify things that need to change, we work with city staff or with the city attorney's office to add or change a policy, which we've just been doing, actually. With respect to any specific issues or things that need to be promoted or changed, for this committee, we have a very specific mission. which is to hear disciplinary appeals. And there is a very good prescribed process in place for that, and it works really well. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? Thank you for your service. Welcome. Community Development, Human Services. Okay. Creeks Advisory Committee. Downtown Parking Committee. I saw it, yeah. And again.
Madam Mayor, members of council, Madam Mayor-elect. My name is Randy Rouse. I am currently the chair of the Downtown Parking Committee, and I've been involved with the Parking Committee off and on since 1992. And believe it or not, I'm here to ask to do it again, because I truly believe that the parking is an essential element in the key of our business downtown vitality and a real key to the future of Santa Barbara. So I'm asking to be reappointed.
There was a candidate who suggested that we outsource all of the parking garages, and I kind of winced, but then I don't know why I really winced. What do you think?
Yeah, as a member of the private sector, I can actually say the private sector isn't actually the answer to everything, and that we probably wouldn't do well in parking. I don't think that would work out.
Okay.
So,
thank you. I've seen it in Indiana, some of the cities that I've been in, and it doesn't work well because the prices go way up.
not in Kansas anymore. That's right. That's right.
Thank you.
Just a glutton for punishment.
Yeah.
aren't you?
Yeah. Thank you for your service, always. And thanks for your good food, too, over at the Paradise. Just thought I'd throw that in there.
No product.
Yeah. Well, no, but, I am retiring, so who knows? I might get a free hamburger or something. Fire and Police Commission. Mr. Banyalas, I saw you. Yeah. You never know.
Madam Mayor and council members, I've applied for the Fire and Police Commission. A while back, the Chief of Police formed an advisory group, which I was a member of for about a year, or maybe a little less. And it really sparked my interest as to how the police department works in our city. And I thought that since I no longer sit on that advisory committee, that the Fire and Police Commission would be a good commission to serve on. I've worked in our community for many years. I'm very interested in public safety. I understand that it takes about 3 hours a month to serve on this commission, so that fits right into my available hours, since I'm a full-time worker as executive director of Zona Seca. I think that's about it, unless there's any questions from anyone.
Okay. Any questions? Thank you, Frank. Thanks
Thank you.
for coming. Mr. Handy. There are 2 vacancies for the Fire and Police Commission, just to let people know. Go ahead.
Good evening. I guess good afternoon. Congratulations, Mayor-elect, Mr. House, and Mr. Francisco. While you didn't win, it was good to have somebody. Everybody should have a shot, and I think you did the community a service by expressing your views. As most of you know, I previously served on the commission, but I left because I was actually overcommitted. I realized I was overcommitted when I was renominated to serve on the California Highway Patrol Commission again, and recognizing the fact that I was the regional director of the Democratic Party and was responsible for everything from Monterey to Los Angeles County. I just really didn't have the time, and I was also recovering from triple bypass surgery. One of the things I was also, back in the 1970s, I was a member of the Parks Commission, and I remember standing in front of the council back then saying, we really need to take the Parks and Recreation Commission and combine it. And I think it took almost 30 years, but it was good. As I said, I've been an advisor to the California Highway Patrol. I was on the Sheriff's Council for many years. And when I was reappointed to the nominated to be reappointed to California Highway Patrol Commission, I said, I'm just overcommitted. I was putting like in excess of 35,000 miles a year on my pickup truck. I served on the original Fire Master Plan committee rather. I've been involved in public service since I was 17, 50 years in one way or another, 22 years in the military and involved in many aspects of emergency services. I'm the current chair of the California Democratic Party Criminal Justice Plank. I've been on the Criminal Justice Plank for the California Democratic Party Platform Committee for many, many years, and as the co-chair previously, now the chair, I've always reached out to people in the law enforcement, police, sheriff, highway patrol, and FBI agents to get their input. I didn't always agree with their input, but I think I have a relatively broad view of criminal justice and fire, and I would appreciate your support. If anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you see us scrambling up here, we have a red book that has all the applications in it, so we're trying to do back and forth sort of thing. Franklin Center Advisory Committee will be interviewed, I believe it's this Thursday, isn't it? Okay. Oh, is there somebody here? I'm sorry, come on up, sure.
Madam Mayor?
Oh,
Council?
yeah, hi, how are you?
Okay. I'm reapplying for the Franklin Center Advisory Committee.
You're Aldana.
Yes, Sebastian Aldana. Well, for one, is there questions? Okay. Okay.
Why don't you,
yeah, just go
Okay.
ahead.
Well, I have the questions right here. So, right here, the question: if I'm willing and able to devote the time necessary, I say yes. And which I have been the last 2 years. My reason for wanting to be on the committee is just for improvements, public safety, just trying to keep a clean neighborhood. I try to promote the Adopt a Block also. Just trying to improve the neighborhood in whatever way. And as far as what significant reward I got, just for doing what I enjoy doing, I was able to get the Good Neighbor Spirit Award last year. So that was good.
That's right, I was trying to think where else I saw you,
Yeah,
and that's where it was. Okay, very good. Question from Mr. House.
Yes, Mr. O'Donnell. What, if I may, what role do you see for the Franklin Center Advisory Committee with regards to meeting the needs of the young people there on the east side?
They do quite a bit. They have different activities there. They always, one with art. I know they have music. That's what I'm aware of. And there's other ones, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't,
I'm thinking about the committee that you're on right now and wanting to continue to be on. What role do you see for the committee with regards to meeting the needs of the young people?
Well, on that part, I know there's other members that's what they want to do. I'm more into the neighborhood improvement, but I know we're always doing something for the kids,
So each of you sort of has an area of interest or specialty like that?
Correct. But we help out on everything, but that's correct.
Okay, great.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks a
Thank
lot. Anybody else? Okay. Harbor Commission? Historic Landmarks. I saw Ms. Boucher back there. Mr. Lavoie, too. Anybody else? Okay.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the council, future mayor, and continuing, thank you. We're going to miss some of you. As you know, I'm applying for another term on the Landmarks Commission. This will be my second term this time around. And we're just about to launch into all sorts of exciting things that I'd love to take part in. Establishing landmark districts. We have 2 that we're practically ready to go on and we'll be bringing to the council. And we're doing all kinds of wonderful things. So I hope to be able to continue doing that. It's been a great, great pleasure to be part of the Landmarks Commission. And I don't know what else I have to add. Do you have any questions?
Are there any questions for Ms. Boucher?
The question I have, Louise, is, and I'll miss you too, how long in total? I know there's been the appropriate breaks, and you've come and you've gone, and you've sat on other commissions as well. But how long in total have you devoted service to the city on one commission or another, if I'm not asking an indelicate question?
Hardly indelicate. I can't really tell you. I think I began in the 70s probably with the original advisory landmarks committee with David Gebhardt and so forth, and this was sort of got me going. I've been on the sign committee, helped write the sign ordinance, and I'm on sign committee again now and hope to continue doing that as a representative of the Landmarks Commission.
Well, I thank you. I don't think I'll get another chance, and I thank you so much for your decades of devotion. And this is institutional historic memory at its absolute best. I thank you very much.
This community is the love of my life, and I really care about it. And I think if you go around to other communities in California, you know that it's taken a lot of hard work, but it's been so worth it to have this very special, as David Gebhardt said, this Santa Barbara has a real sense of place.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Boucher. Appreciate it. Mr. Lavoie.
Mayor Bloom, members of the council, hello again. I'd like to come back to the Landmarks Commission. And you might wonder why after this lovely break, actually, it's amazing how you create a vacuum and it fills. I was in downtown one day, and Brian Cannell, of all people, walked up to me and said, I miss having you on the commission. And I went, really?
That was good.
We had to go our way, so we couldn't pursue it further. I think if I could quote Mr. Gilbert, we know each other from the airport review. If you want a good community, you have to work on it. If you want good architecture, you have to work on it. What I bring to the commission, 13 years experience. I worked on 2 editions of the guidelines, and most proud of the most recent edition, written in painstakingly so that you can point to it and go, this is what we're talking about. And there were, while the other editions were wonderful, I think this one's better. I'm articulate, I can be to the point, I can be blunt at times. In my retirement party, Jaime Limon said, well, the thing you said most probably was no. And sometimes you have to say no, and then it puts the burden on the applicant to really come up with a good design, and more often than not, they do. I was vice chair of the Airport Design Committee. And I met with the architect at the groundbreaking a couple of weeks ago, and he says, when I first met you on the committee, I thought you were going to be my worst nightmare. But then you sat there and you said, go look at this building, look at this building, look at this building, be inspired, but don't copy it. And he came back with a design that I thought was pretty good. And then he said, once we came back with that design, you fought for us to keep any other minor, architects have a problem with sort of like, well, if I did it, I'd do it that way. I try not to do that. I try to sort of hold it up to the standard of the guidelines and the standard of good architecture and move on from there. So I'd greatly appreciate it if you'd reappoint me to the Landmarks Commission. And Louise has been my inspiration and my mentor for my long years on the committee. And I can remember when I first came to town, she was sitting there, being as inspiring to all architects as she always has been. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions?
Thank you. Anybody else for Landmarks? Okay. Housing Authority? Let me see Stanley here. No. Oh, there you are. I was going to say, I thought I saw Stanley.
Thank
was
you.
right in front. There. Hi.
Madam Mayor and council members, my name is Stan Isley. I'm a 35-year resident of Santa Barbara. and plan to stay here. I press for a few more. I would like to return for another, as I'm currently a Housing Authority Commissioner, I'd like to return for another term as a senior resident on the Commission, and I'm certainly able and willing to devote the necessary time and energy to the role. As I told you when I applied the first time, I have a rather extensive business background. I think it has served me, and I hope the Commission well, in the many things that we take up on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis. Particularly, I think my role has been primarily, or I feel my greatest value has been in the frequent and the numerous real estate related, whether purchase or development of real estate for the Housing Authority, and those discussions. That really is a fit for me, and I think that it's been something where I could participate, hopefully with a great deal of help. I must point out that I've seen and feel that the staff of the Housing Authority is outstanding, starting with Rob Pearson and his very, very capable staff and assistants, and I'm really pleased to serve in a capacity that I don't think monitoring is the right word, but staff makes the recommendations, as you know, to the commissions, and we oversee them, and it's just such a pleasure to deal with those people because they have done their work well. They do their homework, they come prepared, and they make our job as commissioners much easier. I'm certain of that. I think that pretty much covers it, and it'd be an honor to serve again for another term, if that's your desire.
Thank you. That's good. I often think that they're always telling us that government should be like a business, but if every business were like the Housing Authority, it would just be absolutely in great shape. So
I agree.
Thank you so much.
you.
Thanks for doing your service already. Okay, Library Board, anybody? Living Wages Advisory Committee? Yes.
Madam Mayor, council members, I really overprepared for this, I think.
Oh.
It's the first time I've applied to a commission.
50 pages to read to us?
I
think
can
maybe a half
summarize
page would be
quickly.
Yeah, just submit your brief. It's all right.
Yeah.
Just,
I
You
feel
get
like
more.
it.
You get more votes that way.
Okay, good. I am able to provide time to the Living
Give
Wage
us your
Committee.
name first.
Your
Just
name?
Oh, sorry.
What's
My
our
name's
name?
Gabe Dominocello. It meets, once a quarter for a couple hours? I'm happy to do that. It's not a problem at all. And I'll even do special meetings or site visits or anything if that's even required. I clearly understand the ordinance. I own a state bar certified lawyer referral service, and all I do is talk to lawyers and read all day. I know. And all I do is read complaints. I understand it. I understand everything that's in there. I was born here. I went to Santa Barbara Middle School. I went to Santa Barbara High. I know the community very, very well. I went to City College and UCSB. I graduated with honors from Chico State. I'm a member of the Adele Davis Foundation board. I have been for 4 years, and I've been with the foundation in some capacity for 8. Adele Davis grants many scholarships in nutrition to UCSB and City College. They have an endowment at both places. Let's see. Okay, I'll skip. See, I'm skipping a lot just for you. I meet every requirement of this with my, I own my own business. I sit on the board of a foundation. I'm a resident here. So I feel that my experience in all these areas could be very helpful, and I'm happy to help. And I feel that this commission could use my help. There's a lot of open spots, I believe. And any questions?
Thank you. Own a business, I see. So, but you are also eligible in the nonprofit entity. Must be through the Adele Davis
Foundation, yes.
Got it. Okay. So either one, but we need somebody in the manager of a business. Okay. Anybody else? Any questions? I don't think so.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
for coming. It's good. Lower West Side Center, anybody? Okay, and that will be interviewed too on Thursday. Measure P, Parks and Recreation Commission, Mr. Casebeer.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, my name is Chris Casebeer, and over my lifetime, I've benefited greatly from sport. I've been an athlete, I've been a coach of youth teams, and a spectator of pretty much any game in town. I'm a firm believer that one of Santa Barbara's greatest assets is the Parks and Rec Commission, and we need good leadership there. Not a day goes by that this community doesn't run or jump or swim or walk through a park, and I think that's vital for the well-being of everybody. An example of my experience and background, I do have a little bio, which I won't bore you with, but I have been president of the Association of Realtors, the Santa Barbara Athletic Roundtable. I've been on Domestic Violence Solutions Board for 6 years. I moderated Victoria Street Community Theater, their board meetings for 4 years. So I have experience with the process of organization. And in addition to that, I have a passion for kids and seniors. Over the last 3 years, it's been my honor to present the Special Olympic Athlete of the Month Award at the Athletic Roundtable. And out there in the audience is 40 or 50 young student athletes. And then at the podium with me is a man or a woman. He or she may be 20, 40, 60 years old. But that athlete, that Special Olympic athlete, competes and trains and has heartaches, just like those kids out there. And it's just incredible to see the response of these kids. They're just mesmerized that this person over here that may not run or jump or talk or have the mental capacity is just as much of an athlete. And so I cherish that time each month that I'm able to do that, and I would love to pass that enthusiasm along to the Parks and Rec Commission. I understand that we're in tough economic times. I would love to be able, through my service, to preserve and protect as many programs as possible for Parks and Rec. And thank you very much for your consideration of my candidacy.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Any questions? Yes.
Chris, you mentioned tough economic times, which is certainly true. Could you expand on, do you have any ideas with limited budgets of how you might work on this?
Well, it comes down to our community stepping forward, just like with the potential closing of Ortega Pool and Los Baños. The community came forward. Monica Jones, what a resource. Having people that are committed to keeping these programs alive. We may have to, and also the Park Foundation, using outside resources when our city resources aren't there. Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you very much. Thanks for applying. Planning Committee. Oh.
Parks and Rec.
Oh, come on up. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, turn the page. Leslie.
Madam Mayor, Madam Mayor-elect and council members, my name's Leslie Wiscombe, and I'm applying for the Park and Rec Commission also. And you asked us a series of questions, so I would just like to answer them. First of all, I'm very willing and able to devote the time and the energy necessary to serve on the commission. What do I know about the Park and Rec Commission? I know that it's been combined based on Measure C passing, which is a great thing, that it advises the City Council on matters pertaining to parks, beaches, street trees, parkways, plazas, and creeks, and on all matters pertaining to recreation. And it considers and makes recommendations on budgets, and obviously we are in tough times here. And it assists in the planning of all of these things, including the recreation programs. And last but not least, solicits the cooperation of school authorities and other public and private agencies, which I think is a great thing. And you've asked what experience and skills do I possess to be successful in serving. I come from the Seattle area. I've been in Santa Barbara full-time for over a year now and part-time for many years before that. I am a licensed landscape architect in the state of Washington, and I did have my own business up there before I retired. And I've spent my career working both in and for the public sector. I have been a project manager and a lead consultant on many park and civic space projects. And I understand the issues associated with successful parks and with successful recreation programs. I've worked extensively with maintenance staffs, volunteer groups, schools, and many other agencies to see public projects come to successful completion. I have excellent conflict resolution skills. And as a professional, I have personally worked with volunteer groups and schools and outside agencies in many aspects of design and construction. Examples of my working with these groups would include organizing and running design workshops with local youth to do features for skate parks. I did quite a few of those. I've worked with environmental science students for wetlands creation and with university students for mapping of vegetation in sensitive areas, with local Rotarians in many aspects of new park construction, and with local school groups and other volunteer groups during construction of some of my projects. And I'm no stranger to volunteering myself. I spent 3.5 years on the design review board for the City of Seattle, and I was chair of the board for 2 years. I've mentored an elementary school child in the Seattle area when I worked in the public sector. And as well, I've mentored a landscape architect student at the University of Washington. And why do I want to be appointed to this advisory group? I really feel that I can make a difference in the community by being on the commission. I think I'm well qualified to work with the issues associated with parks and recreation in the city. And I will bring my expertise and my energy to the commission to serve in the best way possible. And the last question you asked is, are there certain interests or issues that you are desirous of promoting or changing? And I'm desirous of promoting the best possible uses and solutions for our public spaces and recreation programs. And I know that the city has a great volunteer program and relies quite heavily on the volunteers who give many hours of service to our programs. And I am certainly desirous of promoting this program and expanding it in any way possible. And I feel I'd be a great addition to the commission, and I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. You're one of the good examples of when I say we ask for volunteers and then somebody steps forward with your tremendous background. It's definitely Seattle's loss and our gain that you're here, so thank you for coming to Santa Barbara and for applying, too. Anybody have any questions?
Yes.
Ms. Falcone, go ahead.
Ms. Wiscombe.
Yes.
Welcome back, I think. I mean, did you apply just not too recently, but I don't remember it being for the Park and Recreation Commission?
Yes, that's correct. I applied to the Single Family Design Board.
That's right, 'cause
Yes,
I remember you being incredibly qualified for that. You looked very, very familiar.
And someone asked me, why don't you come back and apply for something else? So I'm here.
Okay, all right. Are you still interested in that other board, though, as well? Or you have so many qualifications, it seems like you could fit in a myriad of different places.
Well, my career as a landscape architect was really in parks and civic spaces, and I feel that this is a really great fit for me for just a lot of reasons.
Thank you very much.
It's not that I'm not interested in anything else, but this is what I'm this is what I've applied for now. So.
Yes, right. Well, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that I had the right person because I remember I was duly impressed before, duly impressed now. So
Okay.
welcome to the community.
Thank you so much. I
Thanks.
appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Just wanted to remind the council that because Measure C passed,
Yeah.
we can appoint both of them because there are 3 vacancies. Because I know, but look up at the fine
The whole
print
thing.
above that. There's 3 vacancies because of what just passed with the voters. So
And one of them could have been a young person, but nobody applied, so.
Yeah, but that does apply for this time then.
Yeah, it
Okay,
does.
Good.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay, Planning Commission.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and members of the council. My name is Deborah Schwartz, and I'm here today having applied for an appointment to the City Planning Commission. My family and I moved to Santa Barbara over 40 years ago, and we've made this our home ever since. I went to schools here, and I'm a graduate of UCSB. Currently, I am a principal with Mesa Consulting, serving nonprofit organizations in strategic planning and governance. My consulting with my broad range of private, nonprofit, and government sector experience, I believe gives me a depth and breadth of knowledge that make me a well-rounded and experienced candidate. A background of policy and regulatory guidelines, analysis, land use planning, and guidelines interpretation, together with the study of architectural and landscape plans, give me the advantage of forming comprehensive, fact-based perspectives on planning projects. To ensure that city guidelines are followed and that public trust is maintained, it is of paramount importance, in my opinion, that a planning commissioner make findings that are objective and balanced with decisions based on project proposals and community compatibility. I have no development or special interest ties. Studying and following guidelines for thoughtful planning in areas such as El Pueblo Viejo and Upper State Street would be 2 of my priorities. Currently, as a commissioner and vice chair of the County Historic Landmarks Advisory Commission, I face ongoing challenges of considering applicant requests, public opinion, and county code and guidelines. Aligning these as a basis for constructive deliberation and sound decision-making is very complex and sometimes controversial in that where there are land issues and land use issues, there are competing interests. Some of the high-profile complex projects during my tenure on the commission have been the Botanic Garden, the Music Academy, the Miramar, and currently the Inn at Maddie's Tavern redevelopment project in San Ynez Valley. My track record of thorough research coupled with careful evaluation would bring a balanced addition to the City Planning Commission. I have observed Planning Commission meetings and know the time that is involved. I am able and willing to devote the necessary time to serve effectively. I would be honored should you approve my appointment and promise to demonstrate that public service is one of the highest forms of giving back to one's community. Thank you for your consideration, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Are there any questions, Ms. Schwartz? Seeing none, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, for the Planning Commission.
Hi. Good afternoon again, Madam Mayor, council members. I'm Addison Thompson. I'm currently a member of the Planning Commission. During the 4 years that I've been on there, I guess in addition to the usual planning stuff that we get, I was the vice chair and then the chair of the Airport Design Subcommittee, which everybody seems to think has turned out well. I'm pretty happy with that. I've been on the General Plan Update Subcommittee of the Planning Commission ever since we initiated it about in 2007. And when I was appointed 4 years ago, many of you were interested in my general plan experience, and unfortunately we're not finished yet. I think that I can add some value to the process, and I would like to continue on until we get this general plan process completed. So if it be the council's pleasure, I'd be honored to continue serving, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you. Thanks for
Thank
your
you.
service so far. Rental housing mediation? I don't think there's we've got one person right there. I'll find it.
Why don't you just come up?
Yeah, I know. I was just West Side Center around W's. That's what.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I'm actually applying for the Measure P committee, but since I've never applied for any position in any kind of city council thing, I figured I'd sit in, and there was 3 dates I could come apply, and I would come bring my formal presentation next week.
Got it. Okay, that's fine. And
Thank
what's your
you.
name, just so we
Gary
know?
Buffington is my name.
Okay, Gary. Can we call you Gary? There you go. Thanks. So we'll see you in the next couple of weeks. Measure P committee, but he's going to come back and give us a presentation. No, you really don't need a presentation if you want to come up and talk to us. You want to just come up and talk to us? The question is, yeah, just tell us who you are, and then, yeah, this will save you a trip. There you
Okay,
go.
that's fine.
Go ahead.
Well, thank you again, council members and mayor, and I guess future mayor-elect. I did not know that, but congratulations. So I'm applying for Measure P because I'm actually a member and board member, kind of, sort of. They don't really have those, but I'm one of the officers for the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws at UCSB, and I'm a medical marijuana patient and have been for 2 years. I have back problems and insomnia for that, and I've read over Measure P numerous times for my club because I'm in charge of researching that in Prop 215. I feel very comfortable with all of the information that Measure P and Prop 215 provide, and in Prop 215 I'm very pleased with the fact that it addresses children in the use of drugs and makes 21 the legal use for marijuana. Not legal, but the lowest priority use for marijuana, lowest priority for law enforcement in this city because coming from Riverside County down south, I experienced a lot of drug use for people in my high school. A lot of my friends didn't make it into college and so forth because of that. And I didn't agree with any of that, so I'm glad that there's some restriction being applied to it. And they're clearly defining what adult is in the use of medical marijuana, or in the use of marijuana, sorry, recreational. And I also feel that as far as the adult side of it goes, I feel that adults like my father, who before the medical marijuana bill was passed in California, were persecuted and charged lots of money and time for personal use of marijuana for problems such as back pain, which he had and died from at the age of 35. He had a heart attack because of the medications he was on because of that. And so I feel that it was inappropriate for him to be charged so much money and that so much city time back home was wasted in his persecution and all that, when in most of the cases it ended up he didn't get in any trouble at all. So I'm glad that the lowest priority will remove the spending of money that the city has to do consistently and constantly to punish people who aren't really doing much at all, when that money could actually be used not to ignore marijuana and abuse and everything like that, but rather to prevent it from school use and other things, because that's my primary concern, is high school use and all of the minors using that. So I spoke to one of the previous council members, Brandon. He came into our club and gave us a presentation saying that they needed council members to come in and apply, and no one seemed too interested. And so because I have initiative and I'm one of the people who, like in my high school, I started a school newspaper from the ground up, became the first editor-in-chief, and I've never written a journal in my life. But just because I felt that they needed a newspaper, I felt that because they needed somebody for this council, I would be a good person to come apply. So I thank you for your time. And sorry I didn't have such a formal presentation.
No,
but-
it's perfect. Thank you. We just heard you speak, and
Any
now we
questions?
can put your name with the face and all that. Any other question? Any questions?
Well
Okay.
done.
Thank you. Very well
you.
done. Thanks. Okay, we're going to take a recess now.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, go ahead, Mr.
due to the proximity of my residence to the El Encanto, I need to recuse from this evening's meeting.
Okay. And the rest of us will be back at 6 o'clock. Thank you for the El Encanto appeal.
Somewhere beyond the sea, somewhere waiting for me, my lover stands on golden sands watches the ships that go sailing somewhere.
The council meeting back to order, and will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Falcone. Francisco. Here. Horton. Absent. House.
Here.
Schneider.
Here.
Williams.
Here.
And Mayor Bloom.
Here, and Councilmember Horton has recused himself because his house is near enough to the El Encanto. And here comes Ms. Falcone. So we are here on an appeal. Ms. Kennedy, are you going to start this one? Okay,
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and council members. This is an appeal hearing for the El Encanto Hotel. As you know, the revised master plan for the El Encanto Hotel was approved back in February. It consisted of the Mission Village and underground parking in the northeast corner, new cottages 27 and 28, a new pool and fitness center, and also in the northwest corner, some parking and some other facilities. An appeal was filed after that approval by the Planning Commission. It was filed by the neighbors who live closest to the northwest corner. The main concern was in regard to the utility distribution facility, which is shown here. You held a council hearing in April, and at that time you directed the neighbors and the applicant to go back and work on the issues and concerns in the northwest corner. The applicant and appellants did reach an agreement which consisted of moving the parking underground and constructing 3 cottages above, which would house the back of house and operations facilities. And the square footage of that would be approximately half of what it was when it was previously underground. And most importantly, the utility distribution facility was moved further away from the northwest corner. It would be predominantly in this 3rd cottage right here. The project revisions were brought back to the Planning Commission in September, and it was approved, and then subsequently the appeal was withdrawn. After that, a new appeal was filed by Trevor Martinson. This appeal, however, does not address the project revisions that were approved on September 10th. Rather, they address these 4 issues that I have here. They address concerns regarding the main building, the height and square footage, the Mission Village in regard to the number of stories that was approved, greenhouse gas emissions, and bicycle parking. I'd like to point out in regard to the main building, this was approved quite some time ago. It was not even part of the revised master plan. Building permit was issued back in 2007. The Mission Village also was not part of the project revisions reviewed in September. The greenhouse gas emissions were approved as part of the revised master plan in February, and the bicycle parking was included in the 2004 master plan. In conclusion, all of these issues have been previously considered by either the Planning Commission or the Council. The new appeal is not relevant to the project revisions that were approved in September by the Planning Commission. Therefore, staff recommends that Council deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission approval of the modifications and the transfer of existing development rights for the project revisions that were approved in September.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We have the appellant next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. I'm Trevor Martinson, the appellant. I think that we have to first make one statement regarding when we were here. You remember all the people that were here from the Riviera neighborhood. We asked and stated many different issues, not just the northwest corner. And I even added another letter to your packets regarding Mark Chatillo's appeal at that time. That wasn't the major issue. There were the main building, there were CEQA issues, there were many issues. Now, what happened here is staff got together with the appellants, and I was part of that team until I stepped down before the hearing was in front of you, is that they said, oh, well, we're only going to consider the northwest corner and the proximity to your houses, but they didn't address any of the other issues that were brought up at that appeal hearing. Now, I think it's fair to state that you can't have a private meeting with just a few of the neighbors and say, we've done it and we've approved it. You can't do that. We all came here with issues. We stated them to you. I even stated them to the Planning Commission when this was reviewed, and at least one of the commissioners said, well, gee, what is the square footage of the main building? Staff said, well, our records are important. Well, I'm sorry. I think that the tax assessor really has an ups on this particular issue. They measure everything. Everything was down to a square foot. You can't tell me that the tax assessor's office records are no better than what's here. They are very, very concise, and they are accurate. So we have an issue. The building's already been torn down. Shouldn't have been, but the structural engineering reports that I read when I was finally given the reports show that the main building didn't have to be torn down. But I understand as an architect that there were issues here where they really needed to have a much larger basement, and I'm sure you all remember that when we went out for a site visit. That's huge underneath there. They call it shell space right now. I don't know, they don't keep shells down there, but this is just empty space underneath the building. Those are issues that I think that we have to address. Now, just let me, I don't want to make a big deal about all of this, but the square footage is an issue and it has to be checked. I've made suggestions to you how it can be checked, and I think that they're reasonable. Mission Village, here again, and it's funny to see something come up, and in my other practice, forensics, I deal it in court occasionally, we look for a smoking gun. We sometimes refer to them as shortcuts, zoning and building issues that people overlooked. But here we have an issue where the applicant was told twice in letters from the city that they had to figure out what were they going to do because there were more than one 3-story building on the site. They have 4. Now, this is the thing that really bothers me is that staff came back with an email to them that said, after much discussion here at the city, we have decided that the 2-story building above the subterranean garage is going to be considered a separate building and not a 3-story building. Come on now. We all know that we have a very specific mandate in the RH zone. It was put there. It's a very unique zone. We don't have any other zone like that in the city of Santa Barbara. Okay. That specifically said there is only to be one 3-story building on the site. Okay, but you can't come up to an applicant and say, well, don't worry about it. We've decided a little way to play this game of separating the 2 stories and the subterranean garage and considering them separate entities. That doesn't fly. It doesn't fly at all. Now, I made the suggestion, even to Mr. Casey, that why didn't you get a variance? If you're going to change a zone, you must have a variance, not a modification, not putting it here, separating a little bit of the setbacks. You must have a variance. And why not? I think everyone here would support it, so why don't we do a variance? Very simple. Okay. Parking issues. We have 100 parking on site. You can't tell me that that's going to work even with valet parking. I mean, you have all of the 100 units. You have people that are come for dining experiences. You're going to have people coming to the spa. Where are all the employees going to park? Are they all going to use the bus like I do? I don't think so. That means parking on Mission Ridge, going over into the old school. Those things are supposed to be kept on site. And even the valet parking, I made a couple of suggestions there. You can't make a valet parking go up Mission Ridge and down Alvarado Street. That's prohibited in the parking ordinance. But you can station a couple of valets over in that particular parking garage because it already has an elevator and has handicap parking. Take care of it right there. Tenants hotel guests go right there, get their car. They drive out on Mission Ridge. Who cares? We've met the parking ordinance. And each and every point that I gave you a solution. And I think they're reasonable solutions. Bicycle parking, they said, hey, it was taken care of in 2004. Well, I have to remind you that in 2004, that was a done deal that we all liked in the Riviera. That was good. But the moment that main building came down, they lost all those entitlements. That was a big mistake. But what's with bicycle parking? No big deal. We're talking about 15 bicycles close to the main entrance in Alvarado that could be in a little shed that matches the original building. Easy. I think it's a done deal. Okay, now you might ask, why am I doing all of this? Well, the reason I'm doing it is because I've seen what happened, and I came here in '72, and I saw the problems that we had in '77 with the El Encanto and all the inappropriate things that were happening. We don't need to go into that. We all know about it. But why? Well, the reason I'm saying this is important is you might have recalled when I came up in front of this council for the appeal on 101 East, the 50-unit condo. Well, here we had an issue where I represented the next-door neighbor in that wonderful little Victorian. And he needed a wall that separated it, and it wasn't provided, but we made an appeal. You put it in for him and then denied the appeal, which was fine. First time I've ever lost an appeal and felt really good about it because you took care of the problem. That was the important thing. He has that wall. Now that site is for sale. And so he is protected. This is what I want for us in the neighborhood to be protected for one simple and clear reason. You might have recalled Philip Boyan, who was with the Orient Express, sent us a lot of nice letters and things. He has been promoted. He used to be vice president of operations. He has now been promoted to the chief operating officer of the Orient Express. And I did a little checking, and I found out some very, very interesting and concerning things to me. And this is why I'm asking for these things to be put down to protect the neighborhood. You might remember when we lost a real good friend of the El Encanto in a horseback riding accident, and that was Frieden, Eric Frieden. We all felt that he was going to do a great job for the El Encanto. Then we went into the Orient Express, and this was a new owner. Well, what I'm concerned about now is that there is a group called Tata from India, and you can check on all of the information encyclopedia sites, is they are targeting the Orient Express for a takeover. They already own 10% of the Orient Express, and they have budgeted $2.5 billion, not million, billion dollars for this takeover. And Orient Express had to accept the fact that they are being targeted. Now, you would say, well, who's Tata Group? Well, if you ever drank Tetley tea from England, they bought Tetley for $407 million back in the 2000. If you like the Ritz-Carlton in Boston, they bought that in November of 2006 for $170 million. Bumi Resources, something that some people would know about, $1.1 billion. They bought that. Compton Place Hotel in San Francisco, they bought that for $60 million, and that was just in 2007. Okay, we have all of these, and if you like a Jaguar car or a Land Rover, they bought that too. This is a huge conglomerate from India. They have a very good reputation, but they are going to take over unless something magical happens, and I don't think it's going to happen, because how is the Orient Hotel going to be able to stop a takeover? This is what I'm worried about. We're going to have another new owner, and Tata, if it comes in, that'll be great. But if the Orient Hotel decides, hey, we don't want to let them take us over easy, they're going to sell the El Encanto because it isn't a base and functioning hotel unit right now. They're going to sell it to somebody. Somebody probably like the Mandarin Oriental That's China money, a lot of money coming here. Whatever happens, I'm worried that if we don't nail down this variance and the parking and the issues that we really need to make a decision on, something terrible is going to happen to the neighborhood if the Orient Hotel has to either sell or is taken over. I don't want to see that again. I've been here too long, and I think it's important for the council to just have us do this by the rules and regulations. I think I may have a little bit more time, but I'd like to reserve that for any rebuttal.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have applicant, sorry.
I'm Doug Fell, and I represent the El Encanto Hotel and Orient Express. And I want to begin by assuring the council that we didn't hire those drummers to interfere with your presentation.
Nor do I.
For the school board, we heard.
Although it was a good idea. The problem, let me break this into parts. Let's go to the very end of the presentation. We are here to discuss a land use issue. We're not here to discuss whether somebody from India is making a takeover offer on Orient Express, which I don't know anything about, but there is big business, okay? But it doesn't affect our land use decisions. We don't go, I think we're going to make a different decision on this one because this Indian company might buy the Orient Express. That just wouldn't be appropriate in a land use decision. Secondly, with respect to going back to the issues that our opponent raised, with respect to the square footage, we don't know where he keeps getting this stuff about what the assessor says. We know that when we bought the project in 2004, the entitled plans said this is the amount of square footage that is part of the main building. And we have not changed that from the day we bought it. Yes, there is going to be a new building built, but it's the exact same square footage. We're not making a bigger building. So I mean, this has been in the city's records since 2004, and it just isn't appropriate that we're standing here today in the fall of 2009 discussing a determination about square footage that was made in 2004 with another owner from whom we purchased it. So again, it's just not appropriate that these issues would be brought to the council on an appeal when they've been decided for 5 years. This just doesn't make sense to me. With all due deference to the forensic architect, you get your day in court when your day comes. You don't get to wait 5 years to do something about it. The Mission Village 3-story building issue, I think we ought to show some kind of a presentation on that. That. Okay. This was an issue, I don't know how this keeps coming up. This came up in Tony Fisher when he was appealing the St. Francis Workforce Housing Project, where we had a two-story building, residence, and then we had underground parking. And Tony stood here and said to you, do you realize you were approving 2,600,000 square feet of three-story buildings? Well, they weren't three-story buildings. They weren't 3 stories in height. They were over an underground parking garage. And that's exactly what we have here, is we're over an underground parking garage. But in order to avoid any argument that related to whether or not the two were a connected structure, there's a 3-foot layer of soil so that we can plant grass and plant other things, and therefore the cottages are not connected to the parking garage. Parking garage below grade, we've got 3 stories that brings it to grade, and then we're building above it. So we're not connected to that parking garage. It's not a 3-story structure, it's a 2-story structure. And it was after that was all explained to the planning staff that, and the information was provided, that ultimately the conclusion was reached that yes, you guys are right, it is a 2-story structure, it's not a 3-story structure. Parking issues. Again, when we bought this in 2004, it was 98 parking spaces in the approved plan. And along the way, we agreed to add a few, I can't remember how many, 2. We agreed to add 2 for some reason. But these have been issues that have been resolved and have been put to bed a long time ago. Why am I standing here tonight addressing issues about a project that is entitled, that is not changed, and I don't even know how this appeal is even a valid appeal? But I talked to Steve about that, and you don't have a provision that lets you say this appeal isn't valid. You at least have to let it come up. And the issue that our valet parking is prohibited in the municipal code, I read it, and I trust that staff read it the same way, although nobody's talked about it, is what it says is you can't have valet parking where in order to move the cars in the valet parking, you have to back out onto a public street. And that makes sense. I mean, we're not going to have all these movements out in our public streets. If you're going to have valet parking, you do it on your property. Don't try and do it on the public street, and then let the car come out and it goes on its way. And so, again, this ordinance doesn't apply, had never been brought up by anybody at any time, and even the appellant would have to admit that he had never brought that issue up ever before. And so, basically, I want you to do, I mean, I don't want to demean or in any way criticize the appellant, but I think this is an inappropriate appeal. The issues are not valid. It is inappropriate for this council to even think about changing the rules after 5 years, and we just ask that you quickly dismiss the appeal. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We have 13 people, though, who would like to talk first. So let's go to that. We have Sharon Morrow and, Nettie A. Peterson, I think it is. Is Sharon here? Well, frankly, let me just say, everybody's been very brief. So if you could be
Be so
brief, we love it, and everybody else too. We just want to hear what you have to say and then, get on.
Okay, what I want to say is that, do I need to say who I am? Because you know.
Yes, no, go ahead.
Karen Morrow.
Thank you.
And I live in the neighborhood. I love El Encanto Hotel. I know it very intimately because I did a lot of work on it before it sold to Orient Express. I absolutely think Mr. Martinson is an activist, and he is researched, and he has done an amazing amount of, he has an amazing amount of knowledge of maybe what he thinks should be right. But I think that the project should go along. They've done due diligence. They've done everything that the neighbors wanted them to do. And I think that the project is beautiful and should absolutely go forward.
Okay, thank you. Nettie Peterson, followed by Ernest Bivens.
We have worked very hard to get it going, and it would be very nice if it could be worked on and completed. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Is Ernest here? Followed by June Andron. June R. Andron.
I agree with the previous speaker. I'm a neighbor of the unit. I like the El Encanto Hotel. I've lived in Santa Barbara since 1961, and I've used the Encanto Hotel many, many times, and I would like to see it finished up. Thank you.
Thank you. June Andron will be followed by Jim Seidler.
I'd like to just say I've lived on the Riviera on Lucerne Road since 1980. I love the El Encanto, and I'm not worried about what the Indians are going to do. That's enough.
There you go.
Let them go forward.
Jim Sadler, followed by Mary Moore. Hi, Jim.
I'm a neighbor too. Make it brief. I think we all enjoy the El Encanto. We would love to see you people pass it so we can start enjoying it again. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Moore will be followed by Helena Hill.
I'm a neighbor who lives at Casa Riviera condominiums, and there isn't any real place up there on the Riviera where a person who lives nearby can go and have a meal. And I think it would be very nice to have the El Encanto there, and also that they plan on having grounds where people can take a walk and feel safe and not have to walk on APS. Thank you.
Thank you. Helena Hill, followed by Janine Daniel.
My name is Helena Hill. I live on the Riviera, and I 100% support that this project go forward as planned. Thank you.
Thank you. Janine Daniel, followed by Farah Nazarene. Should be able to know that by now.
Good evening. My name is Janine Daniel, and I live on Mira Vista Avenue, which begins on the east side of the El Encanto and finishes at the Franceschi Park area. I have come to almost all of these meetings and sat quietly, basically like a church mouse, because I'm not a public speaker. But I thought it was very important to come tonight to tell you that I am in full support of the El Encanto going forward, because I think it is very important to our community. It is a historical landmark. It represents a lot of jobs. We are in an economic crisis. It has been approved in the past. It's gone, or the Orient Express hotels have jumped through fire hoops to try and meet all of the requirements for the city. And I live on Mira Vista Avenue with my husband and 2 children. We've lived there for many years, and I feel very fortunate to be part of this community. But it's my turn to ask all of you, please, to do what is best for this community. My children go to Marymount, and I'm a contributing member of this community. It's time that we move forward. The appellant is my neighbor, and I understand his concerns. But let's not take any more of our tax-paying dollars, any more of your time or our time. please vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you. You did very well. Farah Nazarene, followed by Pete Giordano.
Here once again, here we are. Farah Nazarian, 1978 Mission Ridge Road. I was one of the appellant in the last appeal in front of the city council that with your recommendation we went back and negotiated with El Encanto about the problems that we have and the neighborhood had with the plan day, which was approved by Planning Commission. And after quite a few negotiations and with the help of Paul Casey and the staff, so we managed to come up with some kind of some understanding, some settlement and agreement, which was mostly, our appeal was mostly about the northwest corner and the location of the utility distribution and the garage above the ground, which we wanted underground and all that. And then Encanto agreed more or less to take care of all this and to satisfaction of us and the other neighbors in the neighborhood. I have the most respect for Trevor Martinson, who's a neighbor and a friend, and he worked with us on a project earlier on by doing some research, his forensic research, that to help our kind of like put forward or push our appeal and negotiation with El Encanto. But the thing is, that this issue has been up and kind of the plan that we are now talking about has been approved several times, last August of last year and then again in October. And like us, we made an appeal and we went through for 1 year and we worked on it and we negotiated and all that. Trevor had the chance to bring this appeal, before a long time last year or February, and not to wait until now. And I think that on that basis, to my opinion, he has lost his chance, even though he came up with an appeal. Anyway, he has his right of doing it. The other thing is that regarding the Mission Ridge Village, whether the parking is part of the, it's not really a skin of any nose of any neighborhood, just parking is underground. There's two kind of stories on top of it. It's not going to make it's not the earth kind of moving or shattering sort of situation with the parking like that. And as far as the measurement of the building and the height of it, I guess it's something that when it comes to the city inspectors go there and have a look at it. If there's something there, obviously they can take care of it at that time. It's not something that we know whether it's, the height is more or less or this way, that way, that we can decide about it right now. So on that basis, I think that we spend a lot of time, actually we spend a lot of time and money ourselves to be able to get this agreement done with El Encanto. And that the agreement is in a favor of everybody, in favor of the city, we have a better hotel, favor of neighborhood, which then we don't have all the kind of like a nuisance issue we're supposed to have. And this is a very hard work and hard one kind of situation. We managed to do that, and we went through the hearing and it was approved on your order by your recommendation by the Planning Commission. So I think that the deal is done, and we all agreed, and neighborhood agreed, and we all happy with what we have and what is there. And I sort of recommend that the appeal to be kind of like rejected and project being approved as it was approved before. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Pete Giordano, followed by Jan Marco von Yort.
Madam Mayor, City Council, I have written you. I think you all know where I come from on this. I would like to see the appeal denied, and I'll keep this brief like you asked, but I've lived here longer than any of you, okay? So, and I know, I don't like to brag about my age, but when somebody says they moved here in 65, well, my mother's just dropped me here in 1935. So I just wanted to tell you, I have a little experience. I know the El Encanto property very well. Just last Thursday night, I talked with the Historical Society and showed them my postcards of the property and all hotels here in Santa Barbara. So I know the property extremely well. I lived on the Riviera for 10 years. I walked my dog there. You know, the thing that bothers me a little bit, but some of the people that have given negatives about this, when they bought their property, it was a hotel. And the chances are that it was going to stay a hotel. I was in this same room, and you sent it back to the Orient Express and said, get together and fix this. Well, guess what? They did. I'm not going to spend any more time. I wish that you would deny this appeal because I think it's a harassment. We need the bed tax, we need the sales tax, and we need the historical building built again. And I think the Orient Express, but that's not part of the question, will do one heck of a job. Thank you.
Thank you. Jan, whoops. We don't, thank you, but we try not to do any clapping or booing or hissing or anything like that around here because we want everybody to feel very comfortable. So Jan, followed by Gloria Henley.
Good evening, dear council. My name is Jan Marco von Urt. I live with my wife right across the street from the El Encanto Hotel at 2016 Mission Ridge Road. We were the unfortunate appellant with Mr. Nazarian, but at the end it turned out okay. We had to do some arm wrestling with the El Encanto, but with everybody's help, we are here with a good solution. I like to move forward. Please deny the appeal, even though I appreciate Mr. Martinson pointing out all those items. I hope that the hotel can get started and break ground soon again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gloria Henley. And the last speaker will be Charles Croninger. And I've messed up some of the names. I'm so sorry, but...
Gloria Henley. I am a neighbor. I have lived in Santa Barbara since 1962, and I've lived on the Riviera for some years. I have enjoyed the El Encanto many times over the years, and it has been sorely missed over the past few years. I support the project. I wish to see it go forward, and I am happy with it, and I wish that the council would send it forward tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker will be Charles Croninger. There we go.
Charles Croninger. I've been to several meetings on the El Encanto. I've toured the grounds at least 2 times formally and once or twice informally. I hope that you will deny this appeal. I think that I see many of my neighbors here by sight and by name, and I believe that they only represent a top of the iceberg of the people who want to see this go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see, I see a planning commissioner right there. If you would like to come up and...
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just reiterate what the neighbors are saying. This project has been in front of you before, and we hope that you will deny the appeal and move the project forward, as the Orient Express has worked very hard with the neighbors to come to a solution that works. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm here for questions if you have specific questions.
Charmaine Jacobs from our Planning Commission. Thanks. I just wanted to thank the neighbors, the ones who originally brought the appeal, and also thanks to the hotel for being very patient but working this through. I understand there was an agreement, and I'm pleased with that, and I just wanted to make sure Mr. Martinson understands that this council directed the staff to meet with the neighbors and with the hotel, so we're really glad that they did. And I don't think there's a person in this room that doesn't love the El Encanto. We all want it rebuilt, and we want the Orient Express to stay well. I don't know anything about a takeover, but I studied it in law school, and I don't like them very much, but that I'm moving on, you know. So, but I understand. It's to the council now. Did you want to say something? I'm sorry.
Yes,
I heard.
I'd like to respond.
Okay, come on up. Sure.
Again, Trevor Martinson, and to everyone here. Obviously, nobody read my appeal because I said in my appeal.
Oh, you need to turn around and face the council, please.
I want to face them too. I'm sorry, Your Honor. Now, we talked about the parking garage and what was put up there, and I only have one question, and is there an elevator that connects the garage to the Mission Ridge? There is one.
We're not going to, Mr. Travis.
But anyway, I just wanted to point that out, okay? And let me, how many minutes do I have, Madam Mayor?
Oh, you took almost 12 minutes, so you have, what do you have left? Whatever, 18.
18 minutes. That's too much. I'm sorry.
Thank you
I
for
usually
saying
get
that.
cut off because I only get 2 minutes. But anyway, everybody says, who cares about India? But what I care about is the El Encanto, and I was there. I lived there before I went down the street, and I am for it. But my issue is we're not following the rules and regulations. The Mission Village needs to have a variance. Very simple, clear. And the piecemealing that has gone on, if someone wants to create trouble under CEQA, it's so easy. Please grant a variance, deny the appeal, that's fine, but let's follow the rules, please. And if anybody else wants my 12 minutes, they're welcome to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it's to the City Council now. Ms. Schneider, please.
Thank you. I want to especially thank the neighbors for coming back and speaking out. Mr. Wiley, just a clarification, make sure my memory is clear. When this came to us last April, it was the entire El Encanto project. It wasn't just about the northwest corner. We looked at everything. The appeal was a number of issues, and what we did was send it back to specifically look at the northwest corner and ask the applicant and the appellant to wrestle with that core issue. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Snyder, I would have to go by my recollection, but my recollection is that the main building was not part of that appeal.
But due to other past, go ahead,
Yes.
finish what you were saying.
And that the appeal issues centered, particularly Mr. Chatillo, the attorney for the appellant, his concerns centered around the northwest corner and the utility or power distribution room and concerns in that area. That's my recollection.
Okay. Well, I guess my recollection was there was more than just the northwest corner, but everyone sort of honed in on the northwest corner, and that's where we ended up bringing it back for some. I don't want to argue with the city attorney, but no, if you have.
Well, no, there was clearly more than the northwest corner, but I only recall objections with respect to that aspect of the project.
Right. That's we're saying the same thing then. Okay. And so that's what happened. I really appreciate the appellants from April and the applicants who were having concerns prior to last April's appeal to finally come together and work this out and come to a conclusion that everyone seemed happy with. It got a 7-0 vote from the Planning Commission. I think, Paul Casey, there's a lot of kudos going your way for working with all the stakeholders involved, and I will be denying the appeal. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Williams.
I think, in fact, when we upheld the appeal previously, we purposely said that we wanted to constrain that to the northwest corner so that conceivably construction could continue on the other aspects of the project. And I think that if you looked at the tape of the video, that you'd probably see the comments that were made to that effect. And that's really what I see as evidence to the fact that these other issues are not in the scope of what's left on the table. And I think that's important because I appreciate the homework that Mr. Martinson does, but there is an urgency to returning this area to its previous magnificence. And that urgency is felt by all these people in this room. And I think we as a council need to take that urgency seriously and realize that this appeal is outside the scope of the issues that we upheld previously, and that we need to deny the appeal.
Okay. Mr.
Oh, and I just again want to thank both the applicant, Mr. Fell, and the appellants for meeting and doing it's a lot harder to come up with where you can find middle ground than it is to come up with how you can disagree.
Oh,
and so
right.
I really appreciate that.
Mr. Francisco?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think everyone in this room wants to see this project go forward and wants to see a good project, including, obviously, Mr. Martinson, who, as he pointed out, stated that quite clearly in his appeal letter. I do have one question, and unfortunately, I seem to have missed an email somewhere along the day. I'm told that this was explained in detail to me, but on the question of Cottage 31 and its presence above the underground parking structure, from what I could tell from the zoning ordinance and the definition of what a story is, it wasn't clear to me how that situation is exempt, and if you could explain that, I would appreciate it.
Yes, Mayor and Councilmember Francisco, the way we looked at this, and I think the applicant explained it too, that the cottages, well, we have an underground parking garage and 3 feet of soil above that, and then cottages above. So we're not looking at these as being connected in any way. It's not a 3-story building because of that. There's no connection between the two. There's soil in between, and we look at them as separate structures. So we don't count 2 stories and then the underground parking as a story connected to that. So they're separate structures, 2-story structures above.
That's an interpretation, then, of what they've done. There's nothing in ordinance to support that. Is that true?
I would say it's an interpretation that we have determined that is appropriate, yes.
So my question is specifically with Cottage 31, at least the drawing that I saw, which I think is the same one that Mr. Fell put up during his presentation. In the plan that I saw, the existing grade cuts through about halfway through the parking structure, correct?
I don't recall exactly that particular elevation. I do know that it's shown very clearly in the sections, in the plans, how that works. Not every elevation shows that specifically, but if there was a particular section that was shown to show how that works. I'll do that too.
Right. So the blue dash line there apparently is the existing grade. And so it would seem to me, at least in the case of Cottage 31, that were it not for this parking structure that's being built, that parking structure is elevating Cottage 31 higher than it would be otherwise.
That's true. The parking structure does daylight in certain areas, but that does not make it a 3-story building above.
Well, it seems it's a question of definitions, and it seems ambiguous to me at best. I understand, the applicant is saying that because there is no direct access to the buildings from the parking structure, that automatically disqualifies the parking structure as being connected to the building. But on the other hand, that building would not be where it is if there weren't a parking structure built underneath it.
Right. We're not denying that there's not the underground parking. We're just saying that it does not mean that those cottages are 3-story buildings.
Okay. Again, as I said, I think everyone wants to see this project go forward. Everyone wants to see a good project go forward. And I think it's important, though, the one question, this was actually the only question for me raised in Mr. Martin's appeal. It's important to be clear about these definitions. We have that responsibility when we're talking about zoning ordinances to be able to say definitively what is and isn't a story. I mean, that's pretty important. And as far as I could tell from my reading of the ordinances, there really isn't anything that covers this precise situation. I understand staff's interpretation, and it's certainly a plausible one. But I also understand why this would be raised as an appellant, and I think in the future, this is something that we should clarify. Thank you.
No, it's up to us now. If you could put back on the drawing of cottage 31 and 32. If you'll notice, cottage 31 is a little bit higher than the natural grade because of the parking structure, but cottage 32 is a little bit lower because of the parking structure. And that's exactly my house, if you looked at it, because my house has a cut into the side of a hill and then a fill. And that happens all over town because we don't have even lots. If we had just perfectly even lots everywhere, it'd be fine. But the cut and fill, and that's exactly what that is right there. And I think the main issue is the height of the building, because if we have, I think the main issue for the people on the Riviera would be the height of the building, not whether this is 2 or 3 stories. So that's where I would land on that one. Okay, we have Mr. House now, and then Ms. Falcone.
Okay, so some of the things that we're discussing right now were not part of the appeal. We sent it with some very specific direction the last time that it was here, and I think that I'm very gratified to see how the neighbors and the applicant were able to work with one another, and want to thank the Orient Express and their team for having actually engaged in a sincere effort to address the concerns that were before us last time. I think that from both a substantive and a process perspective, to go back to earlier things before that appeal, before our decision at that appeal, and now bring them back up as if it was de novo or something, I think that that's inappropriate, and I'm sorry that we have to do that. I understand, and I know Mr. Martinson is very, very detail-oriented and very careful and trying very hard to keep us to doing things in exactly, truly the right way. And my assessment of what's been done so far is that we asked for something and we got it. And we have people here from the neighborhood to validate that and to share with us their approval of what's happened so far. So with all respect to the concerns that have been raised by the appellant, I'm going to move, if it's all right, Ms. Falcone, I'm just going to go ahead and step right up and just move that we deny the appeal tonight, because the issues that have been brought up by the appellant aren't relevant to the approval granted by the Planning Commission, and that we move the project forward.
And I'll second that. First, let me start off, as many have and should, by thanking the Orient Express, their team, those who are still here, those who have moved on, and also the neighbors for bringing the appeal, for watchdogging your neighborhood and the concerns of your family and your properties, and actually also to the unsung hero of this particular incident, and that is Mr. Casey, for our community development director, who mediated this difficult and emotional negotiation deftly and with great skill, and we wouldn't all be sitting here holding hands and singing Kumbaya if it weren't for your really taking a leadership role, and you need to be recognized for that, Paul. So I think we all thank you for that. I think with respect to Mr. Francisco's point about the cut and the fill and the sort of artificial barrier of land between the parking structure and the cottages, I think that the cottage would probably be the same height as it is today, because it would have been filled. I mean, that's the normal process by which something like this might have occurred. If not, it might have been a little lower, but I think the point you're trying to make is that if we are going to institute what is, in fact, an artificial barrier between structures in order to call it applesauce instead of pudding, then we need to recognize that. And we need to just call it out. And I think the definitional specificity is really, really important going forward. It's analogous to the same conversation that we had when it comes to basements. What's a basement? How much of it is covered? How much of it is not? And da-da-da. So there are many ways to skin a cat, and this is a skillful way to do that. However, I think that the point, the underlying issue of specific definitions and clarity will reduce these incidences in the future, and when everybody's clear on things, you tend to have disagreements. But as Mr. Fell and Mr. Wiley and I know, you get 3 lawyers in a room, you get about 6 or 8 different opinions, so nothing is for sure. And although I'm more than happy to fight with Mr. Wiley, I'm not going to today, but I do know that on too many occasions that I can remember, on appeal, yes, there are specific issues that are brought up. And yes, the conversation should be narrow. Just as cases go through court, they narrow up through the ranks so that you don't keep retreading the issues that have already been decided in effect. The reality is that the council always has the discretion to review whatever it wants to review in a particular project at any particular time. At least that's what I've been told by Mr. Wiley for 8 years. However, that being said, whenever an issue comes to us and we narrow it, that means that we have, in a de facto kind of way, rejected all the other issues that have come up. So although everything may be on our plate, the fact that we have chosen to narrow it, in this case, to the northwest corner on the previous hearing, means that we, in essence, rejected all of the other arguments that came before us. As in today, we can, if we want, discuss a whole lot of things. However, by denying the appeal, we are rejecting all of the issues that have been brought before us today. With all due respect to Mr. Martinson, I believe that I thank you very much for raising them, but in denying the appeal, they will be, in fact, rejected. And we did narrow it to the northwest corner. Those issues have been settled with painstaking negotiations and cooperation. And as I seconded the motion, obviously I'm going to be taking that position. But I thank everyone for all the very hard work, and Mary Rose for her hard work. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. And we're going to adjourn to Monday, November 16th at 1:30 at 226 and 232 Eucalyptus Hill Drive. Thank you very much.
At 10, life was a bitter cut for the saddest of all men.